Hello, Lightfoots, how are you guys?
Good, thank you.
Welcome. We ready to go? Yes.
Sorry.
Mr. Chair. Am I supposed to be red or not red?
Yes, red.
Red, okay. Great. Sure.
Well, welcome everyone. I'd like to introduce the new community and planning director, Austin Hampton. He's here. He started last week and we're glad that he's here. Comes to us from Longmont and Florida with private and public sector planning experience. So it was with great pleasure I introduce Austin to you all and let him say a few words.
Hi, it's an honor to introduce myself to everybody in the planning community this evening. I have extensive background in planning, architecture, construction, and manufacturing. I know that the county is going through some growing pains right now, but it's all pretty typical for where you guys are at with the process of implementing land use code and new changes coming down the line for the county. I am definitely an advocate of the people of the county to protect their rights and freedoms and not have the county overstep its bounds. But for the most part, I'm here to listen and observe what's happening tonight so that I have a better understanding of where we were at with land use code. I tend to have an open door policy, so if anybody ever needs to approach me, please feel free to do so with comments, questions, concerns, accolades, anything that you want. But thank you, and I'm happy to be here and to help with all of our future endeavors with the county. Thank you.
And with that, I am no longer interim planning.
Well, I had some couple of housekeeping notes up top. Let's remember cell phones if they're on, maybe silence them. Tonight is the last work session prior to the Board of County Commissioners certification of the land use code. So what we have to say will happen tonight. We'll likely at this point, because we spent so much time, we'll likely only get that 30-day review that we were kind of speculating maybe we get longer, but because we've had so much time to look at it, that's likely. I haven't talked with them, but that's just me kind of thinking out loud. But tonight we'll start with the language that we've changed as a commission, language that we didn't get to discuss at the last work session, then language that was submitted prior to the deadline from last week. Carl's going to scroll through. He's going to take notes of any highlights, changes that we've submitted. Something gives you pause, speak up, raise your hand. We're going to go through this because we've seen a lot of this language. But feel free to speak up. I'm not going to really try to get comments out of folks. You got to make it known if something doesn't sit right with you. I'd like to limit discussion really to any one of these items to 5-10 minutes. We've had a lot of time to philosophize and pontificate. I think tonight's the night where we get the language set and we get, a final rough draft that we'll get back again to the BOCC. After the language, we'll go to the table again. We've got edits from both TK and Tate. And we'll look at that. I don't exactly know how that'll completely look, but we'll tackle that when we get there. We did also receive some last minute revisions from Miss Victoria. Some of you have expressed like inability to not review it based on the timeline of us getting those comments. So if we have time and energy at the end, I'll put it to the commission. And if we want to, observe those and hash them out, we'll do that. But I'm not going to make that decision as the sole person. I'll put it to the board. And because we got them late, if you feel like we want to go over them, we can go over them. So that's how the timeline is going to look tonight. With that, I will give it to Mr. Holm.
Just quickly, I had some revisions that I
Yes.
didn't hear you mention mine.
So,
And they were there by the date,
They were.
right?
if I may, Mr. Chair, so what happened was, I took
the changes that we picked up from prior planning commission discussions. Incorporated those. There were comments that had been submitted at the last meeting from TK and Kate and Cindy that I incorporated. After I sent that out, which had the highlights, I got the comments from you, Steve, and Tate, and then Victoria's came Friday night, I believe. So rather than confusing it and trying to send a new document out, I was able to incorporate yours in what I have here tonight. I haven't had time to highlight all the comments from Victoria. I've gone through them, but I haven't highlighted them in here. So what I was gonna go through is just go through what I've highlighted. So I've highlighted in blue things that the planning commission has not seen yet. And then I've highlighted in yellow what the planning commission has discussed. And I want to go through those to make sure the language reflects what you recall having that discussion about for those. So most of them are the ones that the planning commission has done. There's probably about 4 that include a couple from you, 1 from Kate, 1 from TK. And then as the chair said, we can have the conversation about going back through the text changes that we got from Victoria, or however you want to do that.
Did everyone receive that email of Victoria's comments? Yeah, so we've at least seen them.
I just wanted to say that I know I expressed this directly to Kate, but the confusion in my delayed changes was because the date that it specified in the title of the email was October 6th. And so on my calendar, I had the deadline to submit changes being October 6th. So I mean, there's errors on both parts here. I don't see how that's gonna exclude my entire being a member of this commission, just because they were submitted by the deadline in the title and not the deadline in the email. I mean, everybody makes easy errors and we both made one, so I don't think that should exclude it, especially because the number of edits that we're actually looking at isn't anything
Right.
extraordinary.
And that's why, again, hopefully we can blow through what we have. And if we still have time, we get through them, but it came in at 11 PM. We didn't get access to them till Monday. Didn't go out till Tuesday, so. This happened at our last work session where TK's things didn't go out, so we didn't consider them because not everybody had seen them. At least we've all seen them via email, but they're extensive changes and.
I also, it wasn't just Victoria's. I have not incorporated Kate's edits to the table 2B either. In part because, again, I'd sent out a document that had highlighted the changes and I didn't want to send out a new one and have the differences. So again, we can go through them as we walk through them or consider those after. There's not a lot of difference between the suggested changes that TK provided, but there are a few distinct differences. And I think even a couple of your comments also overlap with, comments from Steve and whatever. So we will have the conversation on that. But again, however, Mr. Chair, however you want to proceed on that.
Yeah, let's roll through what you have highlighted
Okay,
and we'll move on.
We're burning daylight, let's do that.
all right. So the first change in chapter 1. So chapter 1, section 2A, purpose.
You give a page number.
Well, for me, it's page 21.
It's on the PDF.
So the blue highlight is the recommended change that TK had submitted.
Great. Any concerns?
Looks good to me.
Excuse me, not to be rude, guys, can you turn on the sound, because back here, normally Carl's voice carries everywhere, and even he's hard to hear this evening. I don't know if the sound's on or off.
It's on.
It's on.
It is on.
It's not very good.
Volume.
I'll try to project more.
You don't even get a like, say who we are today?
Oh, we didn't introduce ourselves. Artie, do you want to introduce yourself?
No, you're one to go, but.
Do you want to go back to do that or no? Go on.
We're Bernadette.
Okay, so no change to PK's recommendation, we'll move on. Page 55 should be the next one. Dash, you know, again, hopefully it's a right page numbering. We're gonna go past table 2B for now. So this was a change. The yellow highlight represents changes that the planning commission discussed last meeting relative to density. Adding sentence at the end of the first paragraph and then deleting subsection C. And if that isn't worded how you would like, now would be a time to adjust that. Okay,
Yeah.
hearing none?
No.
Okay. Moving on, the next change was in the section of manufactured housing units. And
Can you give a page again? I'm sorry.
it's the next page, page 56.
Okay.
With amendments to subsection F. Including the notification and then striking the last sentence.
Great.
Okay. No objection.
No.
The next one, page 58. Relative to accessory dwelling units. Setting the limit at 1,000 square feet. And striking in subsection D, the last part of that relative to renting an ADU.
I still think, the way that it was in the original code is better suiting, that it should just not exceed the primary residence square footage.
But primarily subsection A, no issue with subsection D.
No issue with subsection D.
Okay.
So I would make a motion that we revert back to the original language. The total floor area of ADU shall not exceed the square footage of the primary residence.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second? Who came up with the 1,000?
Kate, I think it was Kate's recommendation and then it was a split decision.
Yeah. Okay. Is there a second for going back to the old language? Okay, hearing none, motion dies.
Next, page 60, 61. Relative to farm worker housing, subsection D. So, let's see if I can. Give on. So some of this was a little bit of a cleanup, relative to reference to other standards. So basically striking everything except farm worker housing shall meet all the applicable standards of this code. And then just for reference, the other standards had to do with hauling water, zoning, loss of irrigation and selling farm worker housing.
Okay.
Okay. Objection, moving forward, page 112.
Well,
This was something that came up with the Board of County Commissioners, as far as the name of the commission has changed, so that's really more of a cleanup. I believe that's the right terminology, is that right, Barbie?
Yes,
So the next is on page 123. This came through Kate. I have not changed the blue highlighted part at this point. The language that Kate had suggested is on the right, so it would be basically replacing what's highlighted in blue. Is that correct, Kate?
I have to remember. I think so. It was just kind of a little bit of cleanup and clarification of. Like,
So we're taking out trip generation calculations per the institute.
Yeah, so effectively it would be taking out this sentence that was added and then everything.
You can blow it up, so I can see it a little bit.
Or can somebody read it?
So when we read the way Kate is proposing for it to be worded,
Hand on the screen. Yeah.
I can, but then you won't see the whole thing at once.
I don't think I can see any of it right now.
Okay. Expand that first page.
I think my general intent was like a lot of this is actually included kind of in the table. Like kind of the requirements are included in more simplified ways. And that the paragraph form is just kind of long and repetitive.
So can you read? No, the right is still.
So I think basically the first,
The box on the right is how that first
Yeah.
part would read. It's reducing accounts,
Yeah.
boiling it down more.
And it's cutting out some of the redundancy of in determining how large a study area to include, a general guideline is,
So this sentence would come out.
Right.
As well as,
the last paragraph.
all of this.
Yeah.
are we okay?
What is your, so what's your basic
Um,
thesis here?
I think the basic thesis was a lot of these guidelines are actually kind of listed already or kind of redundant with the recommendations as per the Institute of Transportation Engineers. And essentially it cuts out a lot of language and just says the study boundaries may be influenced by capacity relationships, neighborhood shortcuts, and traffic noise and hours of operation without talking about specific percentages and specific guidelines.
The net effect being is narrowing down the language, or is it having?
Yeah.
definite-
I guess when I was reading it, it was just kind of confusing and left. Yeah, I guess it's kind of like, to me, it was somewhat redundant and confusing. In a way that if you're going through this, you're already going to be talking to the director and finding out what you need to do for a traffic study.
I would second the language.
Steve, do you have any issue with that?
I don't think so. I was just trying to understand what it was.
So it's more,
Is it recommended?
I think it's less specific.
Yeah,
But it's still specific enough to identify that the director can change the boundaries as far as what the study is based on these specific things, capacity relationships, neighborhood shortcuts, traffic noise, hours of operation. And we also say, even though it's in the table that's required, we can exclude it because it's really not needed. Rather than you have to do it because it's in the table and it's checked.
I like it.
Yeah, I'm all for traffic studies being better. I think we've had some real cuts.
Yeah.
And so anything that allows that to happen.
Do you feel like that was because of the lack of specificity? My concern would be that you remove specificity and then it becomes a vague, like, well, whose decision is it that this traffic study is warranting any requirements for this project to go on with that? I mean,
Well, I mean, we're talking here just in general, 5A covers a lot of things, and she's included 5A, so. I guess I feel like if, as long as 5A is still there, we're just basically shortening the language.
And the language, at least, especially that last paragraph says, in determining how large a city area to include, a general guideline is to blah, 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 blah. Doesn't say that we follow that general guideline. It doesn't say that we're more strict or less strict, or that we have to. It just kind of feels like, okay, if you want to know what a general guideline is, go Google it if you're curious.
Or talk to the director.
Yeah, or talk to the director, you know.
Just for procedure. Is this case a motion, because you seconded? Was this a
I guess,
motion?
well, I guess, yeah, how are we proceeding in terms of language?
I
Yeah.
hadn't read the agenda guideline. That does kind of make it vague in the
Yeah.
so.
I want to make sure we just get.
Yeah, just procedurally, like, should we make a motion for those of us who have suggested language, make a motion if it's in blue and then have a second and a vote?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I move to change the language as it is written in the
In the comment box.
comment box.
Seconded.
Great.
There we go.
Any other discussion around that? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay.
Is Lane a voting member tonight?
Yes.
Okay.
Welcome. All right, the next change is on page 130. There's actually two here. These are.
These are Steve's comments.
Yeah, these are from Steve relative to the cisterns.
So, yeah, this would be my motion to exclude paragraph, this whole cistern section is wanting in my judgment. In the first paragraph, A, cisterns shall not be considered an adequate water supply for development where water is hauled. However, a cistern may be allowed when the following applies. Well, when you go over and look at their exceptions, in here. I don't really mind them, except when you look at them. It really implies that water will be hauled. Because as an example. One of them. Well, the last paragraph links into the Board of Adjustment providing a variance. And as you will see later here, I have huge problems with the variance procedures, at least part of them. And I think the notion that a variance to water requirements seems to me to be really kind of strange to begin with. But as you will see, variance is based on health and disability are really foreign to me. I'll tell you more about that later. But the language is cumbersome, and I think this is not what the master plan had intended. Because if cisterns are a allowed water source for any new development, it means that development can happen anywhere in Delta County. Because water supplies may not be available. And they may not have potable water lines, and cisterns are then, and hauling become options. And sort of they're enforced by this language. And that's my biggest concern here.
I'm not tracking with you. You're saying it should be able to be hauled or?
Well, the language says it's not,
It's not able.
but if you go into it, my view is that it in fact allows it to be hauled.
Basically, all the exceptions
Yeah,
make it
for
so
instance-
that anyone could do it.
For instance, number 2, there is no other water source available.
Yeah,
So when you're saying cistern sort of automatically imply the ability to haul.
Absolutely. I mean, if there's no other source of water available, meaning you can have a cistern according to this thing.
Like a well?
Then how are you gonna get water to it if there's no water available? You gotta haul it.
Are you proposing striking all these exceptions or just that last paragraph?
No, the last one, the bug of the.
That's the bug.
But it's all frankly goofy and, I mean, I'm not sure how the interpretation is gonna stand. If he says you can't haul it, but the exceptions say that's the only available thing if there is no other water source available.
So if I can maybe interject there, the intent, the 2021 land use code said there can be no cisterns for residential use, period. Whether it be hauled, but we also have his cisterns that are used on, they have a water source, but they just use a cistern to help with water pressure or whatever it may be, maybe spring fed. That wasn't accounted for in the original land use code. Hauled water is the biggest concern. So, but if there is no other water source, no other capacity, and you have a legal lot of record to say that you cannot develop it, creates an issue. And so the point here is to say you can have the one dwelling with an ADU using hauled water if there is no other ability to get water to that. The variance was at the discussion of the board saying, well, what if I'm in an area that I can't get water and I need to have a second unit for some reason, farm worker housing, whatever it might be. How do I, right now it would be a no. You can't even get there. You can't even have the conversation. The board wanted to at least have the avenue to have the conversation. But the language was to try to express, basically it's a last resort and it really is needed. Or what is the need to have the second unit and continue to have development on hauled water that is not a sustainable water source. In the case of a drought, hauled water could get cut off.
Party.
Go ahead.
I got a question for you, Carl. So I guess the problem I got is what is not available mean? Does not available mean like I hire a well digger to come out and build me a $80,000 well and don't hit water and now it's not available? Or is it the water line doesn't run in my street and I can't get at it? I mean, that's my problem with the whole deal. There's a lot of property in this county that, there's gotta be a dollar amount there before we start restricting people. They'll live on their own ground and, even if they're not established, to be able to do what they were gonna do in hopes and dreams 5 years from now when they bought it 5 years ago.
Well, it's intended to be more the former than the latter. The former, so you built a house, it was on a well, the well goes dry.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, sorry, you can't live in that house, hauled water may be the only solution.
Yeah.
Conversely, it's not intended to be, I just don't want to pay to hook into the water tap. That's not the intent. The water, it's there available.
With these governmental agreements these water companies have, it's, I don't know if you've been around and putting some of this in, but some of this stuff's getting extreme. I mean, you're talking $100,000 to run some of these water lines or extend their water line for 2 miles to go over there and punch you in a water tap. It's not realistic and that shouldn't be put on the.
Okay, well, then that would be an avenue to go through a variance, then to say, here's what's happening. Right, wasn't that the conversation the board had? The board recognizes that, but they also wanna have good land use practice, so, not continuing to build on all water.
I think you should draw a line there. We're talking like subdivisions and development, true development. It shouldn't get than, one guy on a house on one property or that in an ADU or something. It should have total different requirements between I'm coming in and I'm swapping 20 houses on this chunk of ground, yeah.
So is that a distinguishing factor here? Because it says cisterns shall not be considered an adequate water supply for new development.
Develop.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you have it, you have 3 units that's on
So
haul
is that like
water, doesn't
A
apply.
property with one
Right,
house.
you set, that's the baseline prior to the land use code. So you can continue to have those 3 units on haul water.
You've had,
It's when the new development, if you wanna put a 4th unit, that's the new development.
What if you have
That's
0
the
units that
expansion.
you wanna build on your property?
Yeah, what if you bought a
Right,
house
that's
or a
good.
property 5 years ago,
That's-
don't have a development yet, but you wanna build?
And I don't think
And
that
that-
would be lumped in this
I
one
agree with
person.
Hardy. So in my mind, development is like somebody's coming in,
Yeah.
taking a piece of property, developing it into a residential subdivision. Like,
Yeah.
if you're gonna do that, you're
Yeah.
gonna provide water. Like,
For
if
sure.
Wright County serves it, yeah, you may not wanna pay to have wells dug, but maybe you shouldn't put a subdivision
Yeah.
here. But if it's somebody that owned, like, they have a 5 acre piece of property and their dream was always to build their home.
Yeah.
I can't afford an $80,000 well. Tri County's not out here. I kinda like to haul water. I don't think we should keep people.
That's where I'm at.
I agree.
Gotta be gotta look out for the.
Development, it's almost like a commercial versus residential.
So
Purpose.
just for the conversation, the municipalities were very clear. They did not want additional haul water.
Well, they,
I
obviously,
know.
they're with.
I know.
They
No, I
will,
mean, they.
they will
the problem-
bring in acres of water.
Push everything off, because we should keep off. That, I'm just letting you know what the municipality.
You continue to. On haul water, and then the water goes dry on a drought, so you're out of your house, you're done.
No, I
It's kind of like a risk you took.
We're investing in that property.
I totally get it, and that's, and it's a risk, I agree. That's,
I mean, you go put your quarter in, nothing's there. I mean, that's the way it is, but when we got municipalities dictating and bringing acre foot of water and selling people back a quarter foot and selling the rest, God knows where they're giving it, is a problem. We're drying up this county, just like we did in the 50s, and it needs to stop.
Well, there's a bunch of issues here. You know, but. And I'm not so sure I mind cisterns, because I think in some cases, if there's a spring or a well and they have a cistern, it's kind of a adjunct to all that, then maybe it makes sense. But I mean, the language says no whole water. But the implication is there's going to be whole water, because if there's no.
If there's exception.
If there's nothing available, you get an exception to that. And we get the Board of Adjustment in it. I'm really worried about that. We'll talk about it. Somehow we've got problems here, and I
We shouldn't have to have an.
First time I've heard of the
exception.
municipality.
I don't know if these properties.
Hang on.
I shouldn't have to.
This is
have
the
an
first time I've
exception.
heard about the municipal concern, which I take seriously, which sounds to me like they believe they are then under the gun to provide water to haulers. And they're not sure they can do that.
No, I don't think.
And what kind of position are they in then? Is that the case?
The one that's running 30,000 water tap.
I mean, that was the general conversation when we were going through the land use code, direct input from the municipalities. And I understand what you're saying, Marty. I'm just letting you know that was a very specific request. And they were coming off last year's drought, you know,
If I
so.
was on that board, I'd say the same thing if I wanted to sell $30,000 water taps one after another, instead of putting quarters in down it and getting me up for 250 gallons of water.
Correct.
So,
So we have concern over this. I don't know if striking this paragraph is actually getting at what our concerns are, because if we're concerned about the exceptions, we're just striking the variance. I don't know if that's getting to it. Victoria, do you have something?
Yeah, I propose that we change A right under cistern. That cisterns shall not be considered an adequate water supply for. Maybe we put subdivisions resulting in more than blank dwelling units. Where the water is cold. However, a cistern may be allowed when the following applies, and then. To touch on Hardy's concern about like a dollar amount, maybe we could add. Is that just me? They go from 1, 2, 3 to BC? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so then we could add like 4 and it would be, you know. It would be. It wouldn't be feasible for this applicant due to finances.
Just like, that's too hard to define though.
Yeah.
I would be concerned about the dollar amount.
Yeah.
$5,000 to one person means one thing,
Yeah,
completely something else.
Yeah.
$80,000 to one person means one
Yeah.
thing, means completely something else to somebody else. If it's for residential use and you wanna haul your water, you need to understand the risks that if you go and put your quarter in and the tap shut off, you don't have water.
That's it.
Something you have to be aware of.
So are we really just saying, we're conceding that people are, that cisterns are gonna be allowed? But if you're gonna use a cistern, you should get some type of, approval, meaning you just can't. go and
That's
put a
what this
cistern.
is.
That's essentially what we're trying to say. If you wanna use a cistern, we're not saying you can, you wanna hold.
That's specifically what that last paragraph is, we can't contemplate every single scenario, so.
So should we be just saying cisterns shall require a permit from, well, I don't know why the Board of Adjustments personally, because I don't know that it's a variance, just say it right out. If you're gonna use a cistern, you've gotta file, it's a separate application. And then we have standards of what those are for the cistern about all water or warnings, et cetera, that we're not, the county's not guaranteeing a source of water, all those things. I mean, because Steve points out, he's right. I mean, we say at one point, we're not allowing you to haul water. And then we have the language of cistern, which implies haul water. But we just really want to tell people, if you're going to use a cistern, and we can list those reasons why, no other water source, all those things that are in there, it could be a hardship issue. You've got to get a separate permit. There's another issue at play here that none of you really ever give some thoughts to, and that's the master plan. That anticipated growth in Delta County being closer to infrastructure. And this language allows a single family dwelling in an accessory dwelling unit, an ADU, anywhere in Delta County. Period. Because of the cistern.
If there's a lot, they have a right to build a single family home.
So that allows a development, two dwellings essentially, on any parcel of ground, anywhere in Delta County. That has attached to it road impacts and other kinds of impacts, fire, all those things. And the master plan anticipated that in the future, what we wanted to see is more growth around infrastructure, not growth everywhere.
Infrastructure doesn't wanna play ball though. So it doesn't, your master plan is a joke.
Well, I know what you say,
Well,
but I think if you go to any of those water companies, you can
I
get
went
that.
all of
You
them.
may have to pay a lot.
I went through all of them in the last
You may have to
30
pay a lot.
days.
So for clarification, Carl, you're saying they have a lot, they should be able to build?
Right.
What about when we're subdividing? Can you go for subdivision, say, well, water company's not gonna give me a tap, can I subdivide and get a cistern, or is it
Well,
just for
already in
medium
the
lot?
View it right there. If you have 5 acres, you've had it for 20 years,
Hang on,
and you wanna build tomorrow, you should be able to do it.
Right.
And you shouldn't even have to come ask someone for a permit. If you're gonna haul water, haul water. But if you come in here and say, I got 30 acres, I wanna make 5 lots, then whoa, where's the water tap? Where's it coming from? Your well, Tri-County, you're gonna have to endure those costs.
right. The question for Carl is that already in the code under the subdivision code?
Yeah.
Already in this code exists the provision that if you are subdividing new lots, you have to have water for.
Yeah.
We're talking about existing ownership of existing lots. Where you might.
For final plot, you have to show that you have water to each of the lots that have been created, access, and access have been provided to each of the lots created.
But this does say cisterns are not considered adequate supply. However, a cistern may be used,
Right.
but a cistern cannot be used to develop.
I think Victoria's language of adding that subdivision in this section might be helpful and
To kind of double up.
to double up on that.
Double down.
So if already under code for subdivisions, you already have to go through that process. This is pertaining only to residential use.
Develop existing lots, not just residential use, it's existing lots. It could be for commercial also. There's existing lots that somebody will want to put commercial on.
So here's my concern with the permit, like, Fruitland Mason, for instance. Their water tap, they get like a quart a minute. There is no other way to use that water than to put it into a cistern.
Right.
Fill a larger vessel, pump that water.
And this
to
is
your-
saying that's fine. They have a water source,
They have water.
whether it be a well, a spring, or whatever it may be, that's a water. source. That's
It's
a-
almost like we need to separate cistern and hauled water in this like, I think a lot of confusion happens with that, and I think this is a maybe
I just.
not complete rewording that tries to distinguish the two.
If you're gonna use this cistern, it ramps it up to a different level of review, because the review would tell you, wait a minute, you're within so many feet of a municipal system, I don't care if it's Cretan Mesa or whatever. We can't approve this because there is a water system around you that's available. It isn't somebody who just say, I got 5 acres and I don't want to get that tap, I'm gonna do it. We should have the ability to say, you gotta get that tap.
That doesn't include hauled water though. It includes wells. You can't drill a well if you're in a municipal system right now. I mean, you have to get a letter from them to drill your well, which is another battle that I don't agree with, but that's the way it works. And you know, I know a guy that bought a piece of ground. He's putting over $100,000 in the water line just because he can't drill a well. That was, you know, $10,000. He's putting $100,000 in because he's in that zone where he can't just do it, you know, as a landowner, get him some water for his house. So he's putting $100,000 worth of water line in and buying a tap, and they made it. And there's, it's an agreement, it's already there.
But that's, that's not uncommon if you have to extend a primary utility with municipality or anything like that. Just my experience, we did it all the time. And then we did agreements that like, hey, we're gonna extend this line. If other people tap into it, I get paid back. In other words, the normal fee for getting the tap would be 30,000. I'm gonna put 100 grand into it. I get paid back that 70,000 when other people tap into it because you're extending their utilities. That's not uncommon. That's between the private property owner who wants to spend 100 grand and that company that's providing
He
water.
doesn't want to spend the 100 grand, he wants to spend the 10, or he wants to haul some
But they're
water.
requiring
He's only gonna be there a month a year.
But he's doing it for free.
Well, do it.
Okay, so language is, Steve wants to strike this last paragraph around the Board of Adjustments.
Because of the Board of Adjustment.
Yeah,
I'd like to make a motion that we strike all 3,
And just leave cisterns out.
just leave it out. If it's already covered under subdivision, just take it completely out.
Second that.
Are there any other?
That's in effect what the language does. I mean, it allows cisterns for any
Basically
kind of
says-
development anywhere.
We don't like cisterns, but
For subdivided.
I don't
You can get
know,
one.
I think that's not master plan stuff.
Yeah.
By the way, and that the envision that the conversation master plan is that growth should happen closer into utilities, to infrastructure, that the rural areas, particularly as a threat to agriculture, should have more focus of regulation, meaning not be as doable out there because it impacts open space, wildlife, agriculture, etc. A lot of talk about that in the master plan process.
Steve, they're getting the water from agricultural land, bringing it over here on the dry.
Yeah, I know that, and I agree with you about that, but that's a policy.
Talk about master plan and agriculture, we're right on our nose and doing it every day.
The master plan also says that we don't want zoning in Delta County.
It does not, absolutely does not,
Is that-
absolutely does not.
All right,
As a matter of fact, it even references the potential of that happening. That's your group of naysayers, but it
We
doesn't.
don't have a group and you're accusing me and you're bullying and you're targeting me.
No, you're wrong, I'm
Connect-
telling you, you're wrong. It doesn't say that.
Motion on the floor, because I didn't get a
You're
second.
wrong.
I didn't get a second for Steve's. She seconded Steve's. She seconded. Yeah, so I didn't get a second for striking the last paragraph. I have got a second for striking all of 3. Do you have any other discussion around striking cisterns? Okay, all those in favor of striking all of 3?
We gotta.
Okay, yeah, what do you have?
What's the implication of eliminating cisterns? I just want to hear about why. Someone comes in tomorrow and says, I want to build I need to have the cistern. How do we address it?
In my mind, striking number 3 reduces limitation on a private landowner wanting to build a house on their property and take and accept the risks and conveniences of having a cistern and hauling their own water.
But don't we say,
So my interpretation, if you strike number 3 altogether, is if there's an existing lot out there, not a subdivision, the only subdivision is addressed under chapter 12. You can do whatever you want on your property, haul water, no haul water. You could put 10 units on there as long as it meets the rest part of the land use code with no water, just hauling water.
I guess I'm not sure how I follow you, because I thought
There's no
earlier in the land use code, we said we don't,
There's no,
all water is not a suitable.
That's what
you're
this,
striking,
that-
the motion is to strike that.
No,
Yeah.
not striking all water, are we? We're striking cisterns.
the motion is to strike the whole section that talks about cisterns and hauled water. There's no other place that talks about hauled water. Correct.
Correct. How can you build 10 units on a lot without something like?
Because you can build
No,
10,
Can we build
You can.
road?
You only subject the site to a leach to septic.
That's exactly what the code says, if you can show water. And
Well, now you don't need to show water.
Now you're saying we don't need to show water, right? You can build as many as you want, you can.
Right.
If you go to subdivide it later on, we put language in that says you have to meet the
So
subdivision.
my issue with number 3 is that I think not for someone who's wanting to build 10 units, for somebody that has a piece of property, wants to build a house, can't afford to punch a well, that they can put a cistern on their property, haul water, and not go ask anybody for permission to do it.
They can, for the first residents, they can. This is
saying that they could. My question is when it says may be allowed. To me, that implies there's some sort of oversight and someone's deciding may or may not. Are we saying cisterns are allowed in these circumstances? Or are we saying they may be allowed, but you need a permit to do it? Or are we saying they may, yeah, like what determines may? And that language is, I think, important in this
If language.
conversation. And then I think, yeah, if the language stays, and then I do think that there is no other water source available is pretty vague and up for interpretation. And if our goal is to leave it vague so that people have some wiggle room to do it if they need to, that's good. And if our goal is to do the opposite, it's too vague.
So Todd, with all that, do you still want to keep your motion?
Motion is second, we should, I mean, that's one chance, we can vote it.
You could
Just
withdraw
wait
his
and just not
motion.
vote, you know.
You could withdraw it if you wanted.
Okay.
Well, Todd's motion gets rid of my motion, does away with that paragraph.
Right.
But I don't, is that what your intent, is that your intent?
But in effect, what we've done is if you can have a cistern, you can have it anywhere. And single family residence. Well, I mean, it's points sort of why even have this, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Because it has no meaning.
And you've got 129 pages of stuff that normal people aren't gonna read.
And I don't agree with them on that. Because I think, again, this is a key element to development in Delaware County. You can develop anywhere. We're gonna have growth everywhere. And that's an issue in my mind.
But we're not gonna grow any more than the lots that we already have. Is what Carl's saying is.
What do you mean the lots we already have?
So if someone already has a lot, they can build a house
As a win, a lot they have as a win.
as a anytime
Anytime.
prior to the adoption of this code.
Right.
However, if you want to create more lots and sell them to other people, you cannot develop those lots without adequate water, which is not hauled
Well,
water.
aren't they gonna come through here and we're gonna cross that bridge right there, once that happens? I mean, we come in here for a 10 lot subdivision.
Right,
Say, where's your water at, right?
right. That is somewhere else in the code. But we're clearing up whether hauled water is allowed for an existing lot. And essentially, the way it's written now is for an existing lot where the person wants to build one dwelling unit and one ADU.
To Victoria's original, she had suggested adding specific language. Pertaining to residential specific.
I do have a question though. If we were to strike, this whole section number 3,
Hmm.
would that just essentially make it so that for any allowed use, you could haul water. Because like Cardi said, normal people, if you see the chart with allowed uses, that's it. They're not reading the rest of the code. They're not.
Mhm.
And this
Yeah.
could constitute violations and all sorts of problems for people down the road. Whereas if we can just, you know, if they're gonna have to come in to get a permit for anything other than one house and one additional unit, which is how we have it right now, then they're gonna have to show adequate water supply at that point. So this whole section is, in my opinion, redundant and, yeah, restrictive for no reason, because they're gonna have to come get the permits for the water at the point when they're exceeding what is allowed right here.
But if we strike the whole section, there's no,
Cistern with hauled water is an adequate water.
yeah,
There's nothing
yeah,
restricting.
if we, yeah, so even if someone comes in to get a permit for something else that's beyond the allowed use, there's nothing, if we strike this section, there's nothing saying that they can't haul water for everything.
What's wrong with that?
I mean, that's a big philosophical conversation, I guess.
It's a risk that I think it should be explained to them that they're taking a risk there, but
I think the issue for me is future planning. There's one thing to say, okay, you property owner are taking that risk for you. But when water dries up, which it likely will, what happens to the county then? When there's like ton of houses that are essentially abandoned, uninhabitable because someone 3 generations ago built a house that like doesn't have any water in it.
I think
And-
someone with the money will come buy it and put in a water tap. But
What if it's not available?
But if our
Well, somebody
building
will buy it.
which we haven't done in the last
Yeah.
80 years.
I mean, we'll have to
It's
make
got
Yeah.
nothing to do with
to accommodate that, but as of right now, it's really restricting
living off the backs of all the hardworking
people
people.
who don't have $100,000 to put in a water tap. And basically this is saying that there's no other water source available. And so it's not just saying, you know, if your development is 1 unit and 1 additional unit, then you can have hauled water. It's saying if you have 1 unit and 1 additional unit and there's no available water source. So that's, you have to prove that there's no available water source. And how do you do that? You have to have a well dug first to prove that the well didn't have water. You know, do you have to hire people to get estimates on how much it's gonna cost to get the tap to your house? I mean,
All you have to do under this is go to the Board of Adjustment, plead your case, essentially plead poverty or disability or ill health under this, and they'll give it to you. You don't have to explore how deep a well is.
well, but even that costs, what, $250?
I think I'd rather explore than come and plead my case to anybody, to be honest with you.
Well, I mean, but that's a great point.
Are we,
How do you know you don't have well water if you don't try to drill a well?
are we ready to vote to strike this? And again, this is a reminder, this is a suggestion that will go back to the Board of County Commissioners. They'll probably keep this in. So,
What are we here for? Go home.
yeah, all those in favor of striking section 3, please say aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3. All those opposed say nay.
Nay. And I'm not saying because,
3, 2.
I'm saying nay because I don't really understand the ramifications. That may be the right thing to do. I don't think we can leave the concept of cisterns. I think as soon as you put cisterns in, essentially we're telling everybody, if you can, I don't care if it's new or old, you can subdivide a lot, middle of nowhere, as long as you have access and electric, right? Or not even electric, we're not. And we're saying you can build on that lot at any time. And if you show that if you got a cistern, period.
But my understanding is subdividing falls under different code where they are gonna have to show.
Well, what if?
No, it's
They're gonna
single-
show what
single-
happens.
I've got 35. 7 units on it, all hauled water. Now I have existing units, so now I'm gonna come in and say, you got the units on the water. You just circumvented the whole subdivision argument that you made.
Which happens all the time.
Absolutely.
11th Street. Or Peter just did it.
Yeah, I'm really not thinking of 7, I'm just thinking somebody
Whatever.
parts off a single lot from
Yeah.
relative, you know, Don, I think always bringing that up, I want my mother-in-law, something like that, and, you know, put it on 5 acres, or put them on 2 acres, and they're gonna haul water. That's what we're saying is, we're allowing us a residence and an ADU on a cistern. And if by eliminating it, I don't know that it solves that problem. but I'm still for more discussion.
I heard abstentions. Can we do a hand raising?
Did that motion fail?
I'm not sure. All this, we're gonna do it by hand.
But then they don't do that.
Yeah. There, I know there's abstentions. So all those in favor, please raise your hand of striking 3. There we go. There's 4. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3. Okay. So we're striking it.
Okay. Moving on, suggestion to put revert may back to shall under the fire protection report.
Yeah, I thought that was, I didn't understand it. I think it's very important for the fire protections districts as a separate legal entity elected by people of Delta County to have input to fire protection facilities. And it should not be a may, it should be a shall. I agree. Be reviewed. But it could be a shall have plans given to them for review. I mean, somebody's saying if they don't respond, then we can't do anything. But at least it's not, it shouldn't be a discretionary staff decision about whether the fire districts get fire protection plans as part of development applications.
Steve, I don't disagree with you, but it says shall, if you change what you want, shall be reviewed and approved. And I think that puts it into that your application is now subject to their approval. And I think that's the problem of why it was changed to May. So I think maybe we should say that we're gonna ask them to review it. And their approval, you know, and they may or may not approve it by the fire protection code. In order to separate the approval from the review. I'm okay with the shall, that it goes in front of them, but I'm not comfortable, and I think that's some of the comments we heard from BOCC, that it gives them the authority to approve or disapprove of the project.
So would you like shall be reviewed and strike approved with that new information? Or does that?
Yeah, you know what, that's probably a simple answer.
Not gonna comment. I'm curious about what is
Yeah.
the fire district.
Yeah.
So here is the problem with this, and we have a very recent example with the Proc Investment LLC. That project had significant issues with life safety, just simple life safety. That the state was brought in to interject on the plans, and they were very clear. If we ever get involved with this project, this will be shut down so fast for a laundry list of reasons. And your county allowing these things is the reason that this state is going to be moving towards mandating every single county to have certain land use codes and building codes. And I think that specifically when it comes to ingress and egress, certain occupancies, that there needs to be an approval from the fire protection district. They're gonna be the ones that have to go out and fight a fire. They're gonna be the ones that are gonna have to send their volunteers in to try to save somebody's life. And you're gonna send them into a stick-built building with absolutely zero fire suppression, not proper ways for people to get out, people sleeping in there after being drunk at a wedding, possibly incapacitated. It's absolutely ridiculous to just be like,
So let me just, they get a chance as a agency to review it. If they think a structure needs certain fire protection, then they should submit that as a comment. And it comes to the planning commission, you know, just like everything else, or it goes to the board of county commissioners.
the fire protection district was very clear on Proc Investment that there were a list of things given to county commissioners that they needed to change. And because of our land use code not requiring their approval, our county commissioners took it and said, nah, you don't have to follow
We've
that.
never heard that.
I know. I promise you.
Very good.
So
Because we asked
it's a
those
problem.
questions. We have a lot of questions.
It's a problem, and I think it should be reviewed and approved by the Fire Protection District.
Okay,
That's just-
I would say that the fire protection district boards are elected officials. And that way have certain kind of autonomy with respect to fire protection issues. And I mean, I think that's a good point.
I think they should too.
okay, so the motion is
They're out
to,
there stuck in those lines dry and, you know, win or losing.
so motions to strike may and keep shall, is there a second?
I would say.
Is there any other discussion on that? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Okay. Sure.
No much, it's just gonna.
Okay, good conversation.
Next change is on page 141. Kate, this is one that you flagged. I didn't see. Congested language, but you flagged it in your comments.
Because if there's composting, why would you refer to a drain?
Okay. On facilities or waste merging. If I recall, why I flagged this was that I think if the intention of the Board of County Commissioners is to require septic essentially for every habitation, I think that there will be some loopholes around whether something is plumbed. I think you could say, oh, well, I use a composting toilet and I put my sink wastewater into my garden through this bucket. Like, that is not plumbed. And so I don't need a septic system. So I think what I was thinking, and I guess this is tricky because I don't necessarily think those practices are wrong. I just think there will be wiggle room for people to say, well, my facility isn't actually plumbed. I don't need a septic system.
Maybe replace the word plumbed with sanitation.
Or any on every structure on like every habitable structure. We have some definition around habitable in other places. I don't know. I guess I don't, and maybe that's why I didn't have specific language, is because it was more kind of like a question of whether this like does what we want it to.
So I think plumbed is important. If they have the composting toilet, obviously that's not plumbed. If they have a sink or shower that is connected to piping to exit the building and not. Well, I don't know how else you would have a sink and a shower in your house, that is plumbed.
Yeah.
And if it goes into plumbing, then it needs to have an on-site wastewater system.
Sure does. Might be a creek right next to it.
Now, if somebody has a cabin where they have a composting toilet and no shower, no sink. Yeah, they don't do on-site
Cool.
wastewater treatment.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah, it was more kind of like a discussion I wanted to have about like, yeah, the intention of and kind of at what level of habitation it was important.
Yeah.
No change?
The state looks at the sink and the toilet and plumbed. Permitted and.
Yeah.
So what are we asking to change here?
That's what I'm saying. I don't have language change. I think that's was the original intent of my flagging, but I don't have language, so we don't,
Leave it.
yeah,
as it is.
I'm fine with leaving it as it is.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Good point.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. That was page 141. Next item is on page 175.
Did again,
175.
That variance,
Yes. So this is Steve's recommendation to delete 2B as a finding for variance the Board of Adjustment is to consider. Which is health hardship such as medical condition, medical emergency or disability makes it difficult or impossible to comply with the zoning regulations.
so I understand the sentiment behind this paragraph, but I'm surprised that the county attorney didn't have anything to comment about regard to this.
Well, county attorney was there, but this is what the board wanted to have this as a potential exception for the Board of Adjustments to consider.
So does it mean that anybody that has a bad back comes in and says that's a disability and now I need a variance? Or that I have anxiety disorder, which is the American Disabilities Act listed disorder. This whole thing, this whole process gives me anxiety. And so that's a disability that I should qualify for a Board of Adjustment variance. I mean, this is a real slippery slope when you think about it. Because even having it there in that language that they may consider it will give somebody with a disability claim a legal standing to say you didn't consider it. And that was my claim. I should have gotten this variance because I have a disability or an ill health problem. The other factor is how do they make judgments about health and disability being qualifiers for a variance? Is it some different kinds of health or disabilities? I mean, is cancer or heart worse disability or health for a variance? It's frankly mind-boggling about the implications of that paragraph and what it could mean for the judgment for the Board of Adjustment.
Well, so again, just to kind of go over how this works, I'm not saying one way or the other from what you're saying, that the required findings are in section 1. And the findings there speak to that the Board of Adjustment has to find that there is a hardship that prevents being able to meet the requirements of the code.
Right.
This is to give that the Board of Adjustment may consider these items
Right.
when considering hardship. It's trying to put some definition around what hardship may or may not be. It doesn't mean that just because you have a health hardship does not necessarily guarantee you're going to get the variance approved.
Well,
But it's part of the consideration for the Board of Adjustment.
right, and so if they did consider it, what are the criteria for the consideration, Carl?
It's
cancer worse than-
a discretionary action. It's their discretion. This is if it was in front of you as a planning commission, it would be your.
Do bad back qualify?
I think Steve is saying just by including it is allowing people to find a reason.
I don't disagree.
And taking it out
So if we were to strike B,
doesn't really eliminate it as a hardship. It just doesn't state it. If somebody
The
comes.
paragraph doesn't say.
do that.
True, yes.
Yeah, there could be other things outside of this list.
Yeah.
The Board of
right.
Adjustments
Good
could
make.
So I'm not sure we need to be so specific
Yeah,
as far as creating an environment that allows someone to say, well, I've got the ability to use a health, right? I mean, it could be I can't drive a car, is that a hardship? I don't know, but it's not in here. And we don't want to say, well, if you can't drive a car, it's a hardship, because then someone's gonna say you can't drive a car. But in many ways, I think it's cleaner for the Board of Adjustments to not have it in here than it is to create confusion, understand why the Board of County Commissioners wanted it, but I think I think it opens a Pandora's box of what do you leave it out?
Carl, how many times has this been pulled in your term that you've been here? Have you seen this?
Well, this is new. I mean,
So this-
the Board of Adjustments, all they had to go with was hardship. So it was up to them to define hardship with every single case in front of them.
But on a hardship case, those come in every week, or they come in once a year, or do they come? in a lot?
Everybody's got a hardship.
But the fact of the matter is, it does define hardship in that first findings A, due to the unique conditions such as exceptional narrowness, shallowness, or shape of the property, or exceptional topographic conditions, or the presence of historical landmark, now this is new language, or cultural artifacts, or other extraordinary, exceptional situation or condition of the subject property. It's all physical. It's all physical, not health, mental hardships or financial hardships. And then above that, it says in the first paragraph that a variance from the terms of this code shall be considered an extraordinary remedy. Extraordinary remedy, and the limitations set forth section 2 below are intended to constrain the VOA's power. I mean, I've never understood why hardship starts leaking over even in the discussion of health and disability or financial ability, frankly. But it does, and I understand that because that's what people claim when they come in. But that's not what's intended by that first language, where it's all geographic, physical attributes of properties.
I'll make a motion to strike item 2B.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have motion second. Any other discussion about striking 2B? All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, nay. Okay.
Okay, next item is page 237. Again, this is reflecting the change in the name of the commission, the Board of County Commissioner that requested. The next one after that is page 242. This was definition revised in discussion with your planning commission. So is that the language? Are you comfortable with that language now, seeing it in this context?
On 242, what are you talking about? Boundary
Definition
survey?
of commercial.
Oh, commercial, I'm sorry. I thought a lot of it, okay, I see.
Okay, hearing no objection, concerns, okay. Page 256. We added these two definitions, residential assisted living, residential treatment facility, at the last planning commission discussion. So again, does this reflect what you remember the conversation being? And these, just for your reference, this language came out of statute. So that's where the language came from. Actually, code of regulations. Hearing no objection. Next is page 264. Revised definition of unincorporated. This was after robust discussion about the islands within certain municipalities. And this does include them. By now, not referring to them as situated outside, but otherwise outside of.
Here's a curiosity, when this, if it's passed in a similar manner to what it's now written,
Okay.
with changes, with amendments,
Changes by the commission.
what will those enclaves, those islands be classified as residential one?
That's the conversation that we had, is UGA changed to residential one? That's something that the planning commission hasn't really had the conversation. Is it all just residential one? Or is it something else? Eventually, there would be the conversation of updating the zoning maps.
Well, you're gonna do that, so if by passage of this, you're gonna have to change zoning maps, you're still gonna do that.
Well, that's what we were talking about, is yes, there would be a recommendation from the planning commission to the board of county commissioners. What the UGA becomes at least in the interim, because UGA zoning designation is going away. If you want to just blanketly say it's all residential one, that's the closest to the UGA. Instead of 1 unit per 7,500 square feet, it's 1 unit per 1 acre, but otherwise everything else is generally the same.
That is it though, cause you can like side by side, residential 1 to UGA.
Mhm.
Gotcha. So that's pretty much the gist of it.
Are we okay with this updated, unincorporated? Okay.
So the only concern I have is we're changing someone's zoning
Yeah.
without their input. And let's say I've got a bigger piece than one, R1, I've got 2.5 acres, yeah, which is, we have a 2.5. We should allow the property owner to change it to something other than the R1, really at no cost.
Which that could be a recommendation
Yeah.
for when
Sure.
it does change.
Right.
Part-
I'm
part-
not saying we need to
part-
include it in here, but I just think that caveat, because
Yeah.
again, we're going,
Well,
we've
there-
already
there's a-
zoned everything to somebody once and we told them, here's your zone. Now we're changing on them. If we don't give them the chance to change it to something that other than what we're doing, no one's gonna believe the land use code or what's in it. They're like, oh, well, they'll just change it to whatever they want. That's just not where we're supposed to be.
What would they gain by that? They're like going out would get them something that R1 doesn't, in R1 you'd have everything, or is it, was there something in all
I don't have the answer to all the questions, but the answer is, I think, if we're gonna change it, we gotta leave
Yeah, you gotta have
the property owners the ability to do something otherwise. There's all the A5s aren't all 5 acre pieces, all the A20s aren't 20 acre pieces, right? So some of them are bigger. I don't know that all the pieces in the R1 are smaller than 2.5
You're
acres.
gonna put some R.
Right, but they're already UGA, and the UGA restrictions were essentially what the R1 restrictions would be. So we're not essentially changing the regulations on them from what they are to what they
Other
would
than
be.
the minimum size. on-
Other, yeah,
Yeah, there's some big acreages in the UGA.
but, and so in the UGA, there's no minimum lot size.
What I'm saying.
In
If
UGA,
that's 35 in the UGA, you may wanna say, wait a minute.
So
So that-
my only thought is
Yeah.
though, if
Yeah.
we're creating
We may-
a 2.5
less
in a table 2 for those zones match what UGA is now. Essentially, we're changing the name of their zone. We haven't
Yes.
Yeah,
changed anything
exactly.
about their zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
He said it's just one lot size, a little bit.
Yeah.
Right, and if it's bigger than, that's my thought on it, it's like, we're changing the name of your zone, we're not changing what you're able to do on your.
Yeah,
zone.
exactly.
The zone name has changed.
Yeah.
99.
We're making it less restrictive in the minimum lot size. And that's like,
No, we're
The-
making it, more, well, depending how you look at it. Versus the 2 point.
well, if someone's in the UGA now and their minimum lot size is less, is 7,500 square feet.
That is more.
Oh, so it is more restrictive, yeah.
Is there like a list
Yeah.
of properties that are UGA right now? Is it like a long list? Is it a short list?
Pretty big around.
Just a color on the map.
Right. But I mean, so we don't have like.
No, part by
Parcel-
parcel.
But that could be. UGA,
We have a parcel based zoning now.
Any way you shake it though, if those parcels are around a municipality, they're gonna annex into the city, so they're gonna go under the city's regulation. So R1 doesn't hurt them at all. And from there up, you get everything, so you're not gonna build anything on less than one real estate. So you go down, if you're gonna
Satisfied with the conversation, I can move on. I'm all right. I'm not on it anymore.
Are there any more highlights, Carl, before we get back to
That was good.
8 and
That's all the textual highlights. We have nothing for Victoria's comments yet.
Let's get through table 2, and then I think we're moving at a decent pace. I think we can get through those, so. So we're going to table 2. We'll look at, well, this,
smaller than.
okay, and you've included 2.5 and 1.
Yes.
And so we did add those.
So this is revised and expanded, so before the residential 1 and 2.5 were in one column, we split that and added the column for public, quasi-public, PPPs. Generally, what I did here, you'll see the residential 1 and the PQP, both of the columns are highlighted in blue. Cause we didn't have the conversation of what the type of permit or review allowed, limited, whatever it might be. So I highlighted those in blue. Basically, what I did is, since A 2.5 and residential 1 had been combined, I just copied that for the discussion purposes, and then you can make those changes. If you feel that it should be different, what you just do. And so the blue represents things that you have not yet seen. I did not highlight A 2.5 as blue because that was where we had the conversation. But we can have the conversation if that should be the same for residential 1 or different. The yellow highlight represents things that the planning commission has previously discussed.
so we don't need to rehash that, do we?
Well, the question is, if we're just copy and pasting 2.5 and 1, do we need
Yeah.
to split them up? Which I know we had the discussion, we should split them up, but if there's no substantive reason for it.
Well, we could just for people following.
Let's split them up for it.
Or if
I mean, if they
future
are separate,
edits would
so
be
we don't-
maybe easier.
So at some point in the future, there may be a desire to have something different or even now, I mean.
Yeah.
You may want to have that conversation now.
So I guess I'll open it to Tom. Do you want to talk about your,
The general thought, and I think I've explained this before, is we're zoned agricultural, A20, A5, A35. If you go up to the definition of those, it doesn't talk about any type of commercial uses. And all I'm saying is, if you're gonna put a commercial use on an agricultural property, that there should be a hearing. That's all I'm saying. It should give the neighbors the opportunity. I think putting an L leaves it at the discretion. Well, it makes it confusing for the applicant, and I'll use this as an example, and I apologize to Robbie, because it has to do with when she was on as chairman. The recent chicken barn came in as a limited use, and they tried to process it as a limited use. So they went through a couple of months of hearing, a process, and then there was notification sent to the neighbors. Correct me if I'm wrong. Neighbors responded. There was enough negative response that they then bumped it up to a hearing. Now it's a conditional use, not technically, but essentially it's become a conditional use because there's a hearing. So they've lost months. If he knew at the beginning it was conditional use, he'd have had a hearing within the same time frame that it was for the notice. So it's making it difficult, more difficult. And this is a change in my position, because I originally, when we went to the land use code, I thought the L was a good idea. I thought having the director or having those kind of the ability to make those changes was good, but now I think it's a flaw. And I think we should put everybody on an equal standing. If you know it's a conditional use, go right in, there's gonna be a hearing. What I don't want people to understand is the conditional use doesn't mean denial. It has the right to denial, but we're looking at standards. We have to deny it based on a standard that we can't apply. And our standards are, what are our standards? 4 standards, right? Access, water, septic.
Yeah.
I mean, they're very basic. So all I'm saying is, if you're a commercial use, And there's a difference between, you know, 4 units or, you know, multifamily residential assisted living, that's a commercial use, residential treatment facility is assisted use. You know, we split some things into 5 units or less or 4 units less. I'm saying, okay, if it's less, if it's on the smaller ones, we'll keep it limited. If it's on a bigger one, it's more of a commercial use. That's the theory. Hates essentially was on the same page. His still retains quite a bit more limited uses, and that's the only difference between what it is. But I had a conversation with him, and essentially we are on the same page as far as allowing the neighbors to know that it will be a hearing, and the applicant. And on a tangential concept, it takes some of the liability away from planning staff. We've had threats, and there have been recent threats, you know, that people have made because of land use codes, and I think this takes it out of their hands. It does make, it puts more obligation on the planning commission to meet, and we would be hearing everything, or most everything that goes to commercial. Obviously, I'm trying to stay away from the residential side. I think that's, I don't think there are any changes needed. That's the theory.
I'll go with that.
So yeah, is there discussion around that, Victoria?
So, I wonder if changing the publication to the neighbors would be a better way maybe of notifying the neighbors, and then if there's complaints that come forth from the neighbors, then it gets bumped up to conditional.
That's the way it is now. But that somebody just lost 3 months. You need 30 days notice, and then you gotta put it on a hearing. That takes sometimes 30 days. I mean, we heard the chicken barn when?
2 weeks ago.
13.
And when is it on the VOCC?
Tuesday,
October, it's a month.
17.
So he's lost a month.
Can I
And he's
also,
trying to get concrete in before the winter. You better hurry, he's right, he's scared. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just also wanted to say that there are other standards for something to that magnitude, so. Because they wanted reduced setbacks to the property line and residences, it required that it go through a conditional use permit process. So that was out of our hands once he asked for that.
Todd first.
So my question is, based on our redefined definition of commercial. In my mind, there's not a lot of agriculture that isn't commercial because they're providing a product for financial gain. So if you're growing 40 acres of alfalfa, you're probably willing to sell that. That would fall under commercial.
Yeah, that doesn't.
Can you TK
Right, no, I agree.
say, you are using the word commercial in a way that is different than what we just agreed to the definition. So can you talk about what you consider when you're talking about commercial, what you are considering?
When I'm advertising a product or something for people to come in and buy. And it would be agriculture products if you're making on the farm and selling them. I don't consider that something that needs to be reviewed, period, because you're already doing it. We allow ag. It's part of what ag is. But if you all of a sudden to say, well, you know, I'm gonna start to sell, let's say ag-related things. I'm gonna start to sell seed. I'm gonna start to sell fertilizers. All those things are ag-related, but they're beyond what you're using or making on your farm. So that to me becomes a commercial enterprise. What I don't want the commercial definition to do is to impact home businesses. I want home businesses to be able to grow and thrive and start, but there are times when a home business becomes a commercial enterprise. It gets bigger than what was originally intended. And then it's attracting people, you're advertising for people to come in. That's a change of use in a residential, primarily a residential area. And you start to say, oh, now we've got commercial activity.
And I think that would be my concern is it's almost like we need to have a different term and a different definition.
Yeah, I wasn't thrilled with the idea, with the definition of commercial, but I didn't want to go into it here. I mean, I don't know that we're gonna be able to refine it. I'm just trying to say, this is the only way, sort of redefining all that, and those would be long conversations. I thought this was the easiest way to do it, and it puts everybody on the same level playing field.
So the chicken farm was considered a medium M.
Oh,
We have that,
It was on, it was up acreage.
we've got that changed to C, when that would have been a conditional
Correct.
use, right?
Yep.
So we're
So-
kind of past the animal feeding
No, I
and
know
down
that.
for like what TK wants to, or what we haven't talked about changing yet.
Just for
Basically
that
down into your,
example,
yeah,
it wouldn't have been the fact that it was agriculture that would have required a conditional use, it would have been the fact that it was a medium animal
Yeah.
feeding operation that required a conditional use.
mhm.
Artie, did you have some?
Oh, I don't know. I
Lost
kinda
it.
lost it there.
Okay.
I guess I'm wondering, I mean, is this like a case by case? You know, is this a line by line thing? We're still going through, I just don't know how to debate this larger philosophical issue without wholesaling, just unless TK makes a motion and says, I want all my changes, yes or no, I don't know, like, how do we do this?
Well, I mean,
When we know that not everyone agrees with that particular philosophy.
I think it is a line by line, case by
Yeah.
case, because you may. The rest of you may have differing opinions, even, I mean, though TK has kind of shared his philosophy of why he made the changes. You may all have differing opinions depending on what the use is and what zoning classification is. So in that sense, it does become a case by case, item by item.
Well, on that basis, we're gonna vote on this past everything we've done. But there's some stuff in here that you didn't like, you're gonna not vote on the whole thing because there's 4 things that you didn't like, or were you just gonna go because there's more you did like? That's why I said from the get-go, something should be a case by case. So it's the same deal with this, we're gonna be here, we only got what, 2 more hours and we're going.
Just a bit of a background.
Sorry, Steve, I'm just trying to be respectful, yeah.
So I guess I'm just confused, what you were saying earlier about like notifying the public. Isn't that what the N is for next to the L? So if we put an N next to the L, we notify the public. And it's different than just a limited, application that's administratively approved.
Well, now you're waiting for the public to respond. And based on that response determines whether you're gonna have a hearing.
I think that's
And-
appropriate though.
But
If
you've
there's no
just-
negative response from the neighbors, then why do we need to pull them all, why do we need to pull the applicant in for a hearing if there's no negative feedback? You know, I think that
Because I think it makes it easier for the applicant to know that there's gonna be a hearing, the neighbors can be there. I think that's Tate's initial comments too. He wants to make sure the neighbors have the ability to come to have a forum to speak. And that's why, yeah, I'm on the same page with him. I think we have become that forum, or the planning commission has become that forum. If they don't like what we do, they go to the next level. But not all neighbors are willing to speak up. We saw that in a lot of different places.
Well, and that's my concern right here is that I just feel like it's unnecessary to involve us if there are no concerns from the neighbors. It is required with the LN that they notify the neighbors. The neighbors will be aware of the development and they will have their opportunity to speak on it. And if they have strong feelings about this development, then they will be heard because, our doors are open, our emails are open. But if you just bump it straight up to a conditional, that ropes us all in. It takes up our schedules, it takes up their schedule. They have to wait until we have a time available to even have a hearing for them when they might have not even needed a hearing. So I just think the LN is a really great tool for us to be able to use instead of bumping everything to conditional, everything to, we have to review it. And, all of, it seems unnecessary and it seems more of a strain, I think, than just putting the N in there, because like you're saying, it notifies them that you do have to let the neighbors know, and if they have something to say, then you're gonna have a hearing. It's still just laid out as simple as it would be with the conditional, except for it gives us the option to not have to have a hearing if there are no issues.
There's always an issue.
There's always an issue.
Well, but then what if there aren't? That's why I think the LN is there, is because say my limited use that I wanna do is I wanna put in an additional residence on my home, right, or on my property. And I have to notify all the neighbors, and the neighbors say, okay, yeah, that's fine. Nobody emails the planning commission. Then what would be the purpose in having the applicant go through all the steps to have a hearing and pay us, they have to pay to have a hearing. And when none of the neighbors care,
We're talking about commercial.
we're talking about just conditional versus limited. And
But TK's point is in the commercial uses, not necessarily residential. So you could use a similar example in if you have a commercial office in your A5 property and no one has an issue about it, or, you know, pick an example that's not a residential use. I think your point still stands. If no one in the community has a problem with it, then why? Yeah, why do we come here?
Talking about commercial though, right? Isn't he?
I am only really, I'm not talking about residential use.
I tend to agree with him. I think something that's commercial, you get into, you know, handicap accessibility stuff, you get into, I think it's better to have 9 people looking at it than one guy and then someone throwing rocks at it next week. But, I don't know, it's commercial.
well, home business is listed as a commercial.
No, he said no.
But I didn't change.
I think
On tape, it's all conditional home business.
I don't know.
Or no,
No, that's not true. Home business definitely changed at all.
I'm just talking commercial.
Say, just say for the commercial use.
It isn't gonna.
I think the problem with TK is you keep saying commercial uses, but like home business is listed under a commercial use on the table. So I think that it's a
But I made.
semantics issue.
I made them change.
Right, but okay, like there's basically two extremes of philosophy. One is that the planning commission should come in on almost every commercial use. And the other side is we shouldn't, or we should only do it if there's a significant amount of neighbor complaint.
well, and my thing on that is that, okay, so are we talking about commercial specifically, or are we talking about conditional uses? Because it sounds like to me, we're talking about like the difference between limited and conditional. We're not talking about the difference between limited and commercial.
Well,
So we have to hear
TK
all
is
conditional.
talking about whether we should have a conditional use on all commercial.
I went down the list and looked at each thing, farm
Yeah.
supply feed, I consider that a commercial use, kennels within the standards isn't approved, I didn't change that, but exceeding the standards, meaning it's a commercial use, you wanna have a facility where you're advertising and bringing it in. Rural, a median issue, you go down individually, places of assembly up to 50 people, I didn't change, place of assembly 51 is now a commercial type of use. I don't think retail sales and services, I'm only looking at what the descriptions are. And I'm saying those descriptions that in my head, that a commercial definition, I thought were worthy of change. You'll notice I also went into the, our R1C and made it almost all approved. Meaning if you can come in for a variance, you want to go in, or you can come in for a zone change and change your land to R1C, you can pretty much do anything.
All right.
RIC, sorry, I'm sorry. Thank you.
So it seems like we need to go line by line, or else we're just gonna debate philosophy for the rest of the night.
And we'll give you a little bit of philosophy about this. If
Yeah.
you go back to the specific development regulation, this is replaced. And the sense was that there was very little predictability on the part of an expanding a new business under those old regs. It's one of the reasons that we wanted to get away from them. And it's still an important thing for businesses, new, relocating, expanding businesses to have predictability. Now, I believe a conditional category could be predictability, but it's a process that they may not want to undertake. What I don't want to try to do is quash business expansion or business relocation interest by our classifications. And if we can do that, still have the conditional, I'd be for it. But it's just a cautionary tale.
So question for staff, and we could read through it all, but real quickly, how much more expensive, how much more time would C be compared to LN?
The cost of the permit is what?
So conditional use permit is 500 and the limited, if it requires notice, is 250 right now. If it does not require notice, it's 150.
Difference of $250, I believe, was the ones we're really talking
Yeah.
about. But I will caveat that once this is done, then the board will revisit the land use fees.
Yeah, sure.
Obviously, we have to because we don't have permitted use anymore, and there's changes to that language.
And then, but then it also bumps up like a lot more things they have to do, right? Once they're conditional, do they have to do road impact or traffic studies and those kind of things as well?
So,
They might.
They might.
right, I mean, regardless, even with the limited use with notice, we still send it to, you know, internal departments for review, so it goes to engineering to look at the roads and access, it goes to GIS for addressing if there's an issue. Environmental health, and then of course we look at it, but, you know, if something's off of a state highway, we send it to CDOT, I mean, we.
Hmm.
Send it out to who we think needs to review it, for any potential red flags or issues, so that we can catch that up front.
And so then time frame, do we have a difference?
Well, I mean, there is a difference, cause with conditional, we'd have to post the property, we'd have to notice, and then it would come to your planning commission.
Well, with LN, you're doing that also,
Well,
but the timing is anytime that the director is ready to make a decision.
right, so there's no like
With the
2-week
conditional
requirement.
use, it's once the application's complete, then it's a matter of what is the planning commission schedule. Getting it on the planning commission schedule. Once the planning commission's done, then it's getting it on the board schedule.
Okay.
So probably a difference of a couple of months.
Hmm. Okay. Okay, do you want us,
Yes,
Couple of months long.
yes.
do you want to submit this as a,
Unless it's gets bumped up.
unless?
The process isn't conditional. It's subject to the same requirements of the limited use, but
That could be removed than what the original condition of use.
in the scenario that you talked about, yes, you send out the notice and then you find out that there's contention, yes. In the case that, there are a couple of cases that I handled that I just bumped it up. I knew.
From the outset.
Yeah, the solar farm, the mining on highway, 65 there. Those just got bumped up. We didn't send out notice first and then find out there was an issue.
And all I'm doing is creating the land use code so that the applicant knows it going right in. It takes the decision out of the director's hand. The applicant knows this will be conditional use, get me on the schedule. Because that's really what they're saying. What's the timing of this? And with the L and the N's, it makes it sort of like, well, we could bump you up. We don't really know. It's become worse.
I think it's one person versus 9 kind of deal looking at it, really.
That's another aspect of it too. You're absolutely right.
It's commercial, it's big, it's.
And creating a forum for the neighbors to come in and not just write.
So TK, are you willing to submit this as like a wholesale change because it is kind of philosophical rather than making us go line by line?
Well, I'm willing to submit it as a wholesale change, but if the rest of the planning commission members don't support it, then
If you get a second and a vote, that'll tell you.
I'll make a motion to submit mine and just as it is.
What do we do with Tate's?
It's in New Jersey.
We can take those up separately.
Yours and his were not exactly the same.
Not exactly.
Not exactly.
Does anybody else, do you have one of these written up like this? And what your thoughts are?
No, I didn't have any changes to 2B since last time, that are more restrictive. I had it, I thought we were done with that. I did have a couple definition tweaks, but
More textual. The land use code text, we're all right.
mine are really text, but I do want to say, just on this again, I think it's really, we're speculating that it could speed up the process to go in straight out conditional. But if everything is conditional, then our schedule is gonna be booked up who knows how far out. And that does not guarantee that the applicant is gonna have a faster process. It does guarantee that they know they have to go in for a hearing, but again, there may not be a need for a hearing, and then it's an unreasonable use of their time, their money, our time. Just because we would have to review every piece of development, whether there was any kind of negative comments about it or not.
Yeah, but it's a commercial part though.
Well, and again, it's like, what do you,
Some commercial gonna have something's gonna be like,
It's,
More
okay,
reviews
so
and-
my neighbor wants to put in a kennel. The definition of kennel is it has to be wholly enclosed in a building. 6 dogs. So if you wanna have a kennel that's wholly enclosed in a building with 7 dogs, now you've gotta come in and have a hearing, even though you sent your notice out to your neighbors and nobody cared.
I would say so, because, you know, that starts impacting more people up and down that road, and just, you know, 7 turns into 38. And
But you already have all the same,
the same people come to get 6 dogs as you got 7 dogs. You got more.
I'm not saying that, I'm saying that you still have the same review process, correct? You still have the same people looking at it on our staff, sending it to all the same agencies that they feel are appropriate. It's not just one person looking at it. An L is an administrative power, you know, an L alone is, you know, our new director. I'm sorry, I forgot his name. Austin. Austin can look at the L and say, you know, this I'm gonna approve. And LN requires that the public have a chance to speak, which I think is what we're all going for here, is the neighbors have a chance to speak. And if they don't speak, then it could be a very simple. It's still going through all the agencies that are referring it.
We're not going through our agency, and sometimes we come up with a few things that make a little sense that everybody else missed here. And that's at this table, you know, we got it from different angles, and that was what they would miss on a commercial deal. And I think the LN kind of muddies the water. I think it should go from L to, you know.
PK submitted a motion. Does anyone second this wholesale change? Thank you, Lane. I think we know where some of us stand. Is there any last minute?
Motion is to submit my recommendation as a change to the land use code as I presented it.
That's
It's essentially
highlighted
the
blue. What TK has deemed commercial and may be warranted to come to the planning commission.
Well, it's twofold in the 835, 820, 85 in the residential zone, there's more going from limited use to commercial. However, alternatively, in the rural industrial commercial designation, it's going from limited to allowed.
Right.
In many cases.
Kate, you see anything on here you don't like? You.
I don't think that I would vote for the wholesale change of it. I agree. I think there's some things that if there's no neighborhood complaint, that if it's noticed and no one complains, why bring them in here? But I can't agree to like the wholesale change, and I don't know if I have it in me to review line by line.
Carl,
That's what I'm saying. How do we do that?
Because we did go
We
line by
did go
line.
line by line for some things, and I guess, yeah, I was happy where it was
You
left
want me to read
essentially.
through the changes to everybody?
Yeah, I'd like to do that.
Okay. So first, actually, the planning commission had gone through the rural residential, but in the 2 residential zones, the A 2.5 and residential 1, the suggestion would be for that to be commercial. And then,
Additional.
conditional, yeah. Now I'm going. All right, farm supply. Changing A35, A20, A5, and the residential designations to conditional. Similarly with kennel that exceeds the standards would be all conditional, except rural industrial commercial would be allowed. That would be the same for rural light industry. Rural medium industry. Rural heavy industry, so that would actually make the rural industrial commercial allowed. Vet hospital or clinic would be all conditional, except in the rural industrial commercial would be allowed. Places of assembly, A35, A20, A5 would be limited. A 2.5 residential 1, well, they should probably be the same, but conditional, I think was the intent there. Is that right, TK? Places of assembly 51 plus would be all conditional, except rural industrial commercial would be allowed. Schools would be changing our A 2.5 and residential from allowed to conditional. Schools 31 plus would be all conditional, except rural industrial commercial would be allowed. Child care center up to 13 would be limited, except rural industrial commercial where it would be allowed. Child care center conditional, except rural industrial and commercial where it would be allowed. Retail sales and services, all conditional, other than rural industrial commercial, same with office and restaurant. Automobile fueling station would not be allowed in the A 2.5 and residential 1. Storage facility would be conditional in all zones except rural industrial commercial where it would be allowed. Home business impacting the neighbor property, instead of limited with notice would be conditional in the A 2.5 residential 1. 5 to 10 rentable rooms would be all conditional except rural industrial commercial where it's allowed. Same with more than 10 rentable rooms. Same with equestrian facilities. Indoor shooting range. Paintball course would be conditional in A 35, A 20, A 5, allowed in the rural industrial commercial. Hunting, fishing, etc. would be limited in A 35, A 20, A 5, allowed in rural industrial commercial. Event venue would be conditional in all zones except rural industrial commercial where it would be allowed. Similar with campground, which was partially just the yellow represents it was partially discussed by the planning commission. Commercial outdoor recreation would be commercial A 35, A 20, A 5, allowed in rural industrial commercial. Theater would be conditional in all zones except rural industrial commercial where it's allowed. Airport airstrip landing pad would be commercial in all designations except rural industrial commercial where it would be allowed. Landfill would go from not allowed to conditional in the rural industrial commercial zone, and then conditional in the residential zones. Hazardous waste landfill would be conditional in the rural industrial zone. And that was the end of PK's changes.
So again, if you were in a rural industrial commercial, which is the only definition of commercial in our land use code, it should be allowed. You shouldn't have anything. If you want to come in and do a rezone, which takes a public hearing anyway, and you go through that process, you can basically do anything. Otherwise, it's pretty, when you hear it, it's a pretty consistent change. Go ahead.
TK, on the filling station, you said you're calling for it not allowed in R2. It makes sense that, that's gonna be, R2s are gonna be right around municipalities and stuff. You would assume that where they're going, even if you don't annex into a city, there's not far-fetched to find that there's a gas station right by a city and
Change it to what, a limited use or something like, I'm okay with that.
something like that, but
Yeah.
not allowed.
Yeah. I guess I look at filling station as a commercial operation.
And I think what TK wants to see is if you're gonna do something of that nature, change your zoning.
I mean, a filling station, typically, gas stations have convenience stores.
Yeah. But that's where they're gonna be, it's smaller zone. R2, I don't know where, I
don't even, where is the
They're
filling
burning
station?
through it. pretty
It's-
fast.
Under what?
It's up on the screen. It's under commercial land use category. And the way it was conditional in A 35, A 20, A 5, limited use in rural industrial commercial. The change occurred in the residential and A 2.5, going from conditional to not allowed.
I guess I looked at a fueling service stations, not something that should be in the two, but put it back in, it's okay with me. I'm not gonna argue.
Conditional allows at least an opportunity to have the review and the discussion that parties
Leave it in,
talking about.
fine with me. I'm not.
I
No,
just had a question on what Jacob said. You said, I believe it was you that just change your zoning then?
you asking me?
No.
I'm sorry, you were looking at
So
it.
if, yeah, so if.
Yeah, I'm speculating that that's kind of what TK is going for, is if we want to see rural industrial commercial uses, we should zone them as such. Rather than sticking them in agricultural.
Well, we should give the applicant the opportunity, the chance to do that. That's up to them.
So they could rezone their property to that.
Yeah,
And then becomes an
Where does
allowed
the
use based on
protection
how.
come to the neighbors in that then?
there's a hearing.
Rezoning is follows, just like we were just talking about the conditional use, it's a recommendation for the planning commission and the board of county commissioners to take that action.
However, we did do a rezone earlier and it's hard to distinguish, like we would have to vote on whether, according to the code, a rezone is appropriate without considering what the project is
Right.
going forward. So someone's not gonna come in and say, I wanna do a gas station here, I wanna rezone. There's, like, we can't really decide that. We have to decide whether they're allowed to have a rezone regardless of what they do with that property.
Right, but if we're hearing an application to rezone to industrial commercial, we have to approve that, knowing
Assume,
they're gonna be able to
Sure.
do whatever the hell they
yeah.
Then,
Yeah.
if we're approved as recommended, there's a lot of allowed uses then in that they could be doing.
So again, PK's put a motion for his philosophy of changing this. Is there a second to this?
Lane seconded.
Lane second,
So what's alternative? What does it look like if we, no?
it just goes back to what it was, all across that.
Or someone.
The alternative is that more staff. More staff that goes in, yeah, right, well.
Be a million.
Well, what we got were changes from VOCC, right? What came to us were changes that they made to.
Right.
Yeah, so it wasn't the original, it was already
Right.
modified from their meetings.
Hard to tell now what we decided as a commission was good and what the BOCC decided was good is, I think we all forget which.
Well, I
What
think they put
happened?
more things into the limited use than what was there before, and I'm going back the other way, saying, all right, we're gonna put more in conditional use, so there's hearings.
In an effort to encourage and support agriculture, if we were to remove the changes from the agricultural support and rural industrial land use category, with the exception of the RIC all going to allowed,
Well, fine, show me where you're talking about.
Talking about farm feed supply, kennels,
those are mainly.
Farm worker housing.
Just
Those are my
So you
concerns.
want to go back to L?
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm talking like, look at major stuff.
cool. I think, I look at them as retail type of, okay.
Changing motion.
Kennels are big operations. Well, I'd modify my motion then to say. As is, except for leave the agriculture support and rural industrial land use categories as they were,
except for RIC.
except for RIC. Okay,
That make it confusing enough?
no, I'm sure it will. That helps.
So,
I would say that.
so just for clarification then, so. Everything that's highlighted. In blue, like, all of this. Would not change, except. The rural industrial commercial designation would change to go from limited use to allowed use.
Correct.
For farm supply, kennel, exceeding standards, rural light industry, rural medium industry, rural heavy industry, and the vet hospital.
Yes.
Does everybody follow that? The rural heavy industry,
So rural heavy use already had a C.
Yeah.
really the only change to rural heavy industry is in the rural industrial commercial zone going from limited with hearing to allowed.
Right. But I didn't change that. I didn't change the kennel within the standards either, or the farm worker housing. But I'm okay with that.
Okay,
That's a good compromise.
so motion as amended to keep agricultural support in rural industries. A little more easier to get through, essentially.
That helps.
Okay, all those in favor of these changes, please raise your hand. All those opposed saying, raise your hand. One and a half.
Right, both of them.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So now.
Let's look at Pates.
Okay, that's where I was. Okay.
Yeah.
So Tate had recommended some
Change
changes.
that's happening.
Yes, yes, to the intensive ag and the rural residential, but the planning commission had already gone through them. You want to consider
No,
those changes, that the planning commission has had those conversations. I'm sorry, one more time.
I don't think so.
So Kate, for example, the multifamily and residential assisted living. I had recommended that they be all commercial, straight across,
Conditional.
or conditional. Sorry. All conditional across the board in every zoning designation. The planning commission had already been through this category. So you want to reopen that?
Where we at?
I feel like we already did it. Let's move on.
Rural residential land use
Yeah.
category. For second,
Right, no desire to go there? No.
Hey, what do you think?
Any motion? For farm worker housing. Kate was recommending the rural industrial commercial and the residential zones to go from limited to commercial use.
Conditional use.
Conditional use. I'm seeing Cs.
For which zones?
For rural industrial commercial, 82.5 and residential.
Or what's
For farm worker housing,
your agricultural support, okay.
yes. Unless I hear somebody throw out a motion, I'm just gonna keep going.
We're going through all the Tate stuff.
yeah,
Yes,
And there's
Something feels-
on,
and then we're gonna move on to Victoria's.
right.
I sure would like to hear Tate's arguments, but it's not here. So,
Well, Tate's
it's his problem.
general argument was my main goal is for neighbor to an application for change of use be noticed to have a chance to speak about potential impacts to the property when there is a new land use being proposed. That's generally what his basis was for his recommendation. So not hearing any support for the change to farm worker housing. The kennel within standards. He is recommending changing from A to allowed to conditional, except in the A35 and A20, it would remain allowed. Okay. Hearing nobody jumping in on that. The next is places of assembly, up to 50 people. Changing in the A5, changing that to conditional use as well as the residential one, which I think was really a typo on my part. It should be the same as A2.5.
And we just changed everything to L with TK's change.
Correct. So that would be a change to the change you just made. So, doing,
Sorry, Tate.
It's allowed in residential. Or in commercial industrial.
just in the commercial industrial.
But you're gonna review when they build a second house on their farm, but a big industrial thing is allowed there, it's not even in the scope.
It's already going over that.
Zoning.
Zoning is like that.
It's a huge list of things.
Hardy.
so. Do you want me to just focus on the changes that Kate recommended that you didn't just vote on? I think that maybe that would
Yeah.
help expedite this a little bit.
Yeah, I think we kind of already agreed. Voted on.
Okay, so. Schools up to 30 students recommended conditional use in the A5 zone.
And we just voted on L and.
No, there was no
Oh, there's
change.
no change.
School. And it's a long.
It's a lot, yeah. Again, this is up to 30 students. This is that first tier versus the higher tier. Once it goes over 30 students is conditional
I
use.
think that's a good threshold.
Okay,
That's quite a bit of traffic, but
30, yeah.
yeah. I think I would agree with it's an A5, like that's generally a kind of a subdivision type area. That's 30 students. It's a fair amount of extra traffic and impact to the area.
Okay, motion is to change that to C. I'd second that. Any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, great. We'll change from schools up to 30 to conditional on A5 and residential.
alright, Next is home business, the impact to neighboring property. Kate was recommending limited with notice to be conditional in the A35, A20, A5, and rural industrial commercial zone. We just changed the A 2.5 in residential one. He's suggesting it should be conditional in all zoning designations.
And what did we have it as right now through TK deal?
Limited with notice, with public notice.
He's saying conditional.
He is recommending conditional, but they're highlighted in gray up there. Yes.
I'm not following. I've got Kate's thing, it's home business. It's A all across the board.
Home, it's like
That's-
the word is cut off, it's a home business with
The one below.
impact to neighbors.
The
I
C's
have
below that.
no, nothing on.
Keep, it's the line right underneath home business, there's a bunch of Cs with nothing in that box, it's
Oh, I
actually,
see, that's where.
Yeah.
That's
home business.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Okay. Right, I didn't make any changes, and he's made changes to conditional use.
Correct.
Who's saying the impact to neighboring business? Who makes a call on that?
There's the criteria is in the chapter 2 relative to home business. If you meet certain standards, it's an allowed use. Once you exceed that, or if you create an impact to traffic or noise or dust to a neighboring property, then it would be right now elevated to a limited use with notice.
And like, who makes that call? Everett or? Like does, like one extra car goes and does?
The director.
Well, it would be the director, not
Director.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be, regardless, it would be the director making the call, whether there was impact to neighboring property or not. It's whether it comes to us or whether it just gets noticed and is administered.
Correct.
Well, it'd be bumping up all the limited with notice, because they're all
Conditional.
LMs.
Yeah.
Up to condition, that's the
Right.
change.
Right.
And I personally stayed away from home businesses, but Kate is stepping into it, and I'm not sure.
I think,
Not hearing anybody making a recommendation,
Well,
move on. He's actually suggesting instead of having not allowed an A35 and A20, that a sexually oriented business would be conditional use. Nice. I don't know what the plan is there, but.
he's got a strip club client.
All right. Moving on, the next changes are in the utility, the wireless communications. And specifically in the A5 zone, that they all be conditional use, all the different line items. As well as in the residential zones going from limited to with notice to conditional use, so. What I see is Tate's kind of putting the A5, A 2.5, Res 1 as residential type uses, and that they would all require conditional use from them.
Yeah, if it was renewable, energy facility person scale, like you have to get a permit to put up a solar panel underneath. And on over 10 minutes.
I don't know if
Okay. Hearing none. Sheriff, up to you. We're done with Tate's. Yep. Okay, let's go on. Do we have pronounced obituaries for everybody? Okay. How do you wanna tackle this, Victoria? Sure, could I take a 5-minute? Oh, yeah, let's take a bio break. We'll come back at 7:45. Rest your fingers.
No.
You got full?
Eight. Yeah, I know. It's all in it. Section. Okay, and you see it 7-8 minutes.
We'll bring it back. We're gonna open up. We're gonna open up language again. TK did make a good point, Victoria. Some of these are questions which you've clearly noted. Some of them may be questions for legal I don't know if we want to address those, so, you know. We'll kind of flag those as we go along, but let's try to, you know, if you have a succinct way to kind of present these to us, we'll kind of take these as motions. We have a second, we'll try to get through this, so.
Yeah, as long as you can just pull it up on the screen, then I'll explain my, reasoning and my thought process.
Sure.
So, for chapter 1, section 3E1, I move to change the language to follow what I have in my notes here, mostly because I don't agree with the fact that if a violation occurs prior to the effective date, but is no longer a violation, that the county should be treating it like a violation and pursuing remedies from the property owner. I think that if it's no longer a violation, they've made it not a violation because it's not hurting anyone and the property cannot be fined on a non-violation.
Okay.
You have any idea?
That's the section.
Yes, and then, the main, change to section 1A is I think that a notice of violation needs to be served upon a property owner. Like appropriately served instead of just whoever's on the property. I think that the property owner needs to be aware because the penalties, the fines and the enforcement are on the property owner and they can lose their property due to fines and violation fines specifically. Whereas if you did not make sure that the property owner was aware of these violations, how are you gonna take their property away? I think that there needs to be served either, you know, via a process server or a deputy appropriately to the property owner and make sure that they're aware of the violations.
So is that running into what's considered notice as far as state statutes? Or all do you know, are you even to something else?
I'm just trying to reflect the changes up here on the
I
screen.
guess I'm feeling like you're defining what notice is. And I'm a little concerned that it should be run by the county attorney. I don't really want to feel, I'm not comfortable here making a determination on notices. That's where I sort of wrote down legal. That's a legal issue. I don't think we as a planning commission should be dealing with legal issues. I'm not saying that your concerns aren't legitimate. I think they should go to the they should go to the county attorney and let him decide if that's what the determination notice is, not for us to decide. That's all I'm thinking.
I think the importance that the property owner be like, and not like a tenant that may never tell their landlord, like, I do think that's important.
Yeah.
And if, I think we could always vote on it, and if the county attorney sees it and goes, oh, wait, red flag, then he would say something.
Sure.
So I tried to type in what I picked up as the edits that Victoria's recommending, so the green represents addition, deletion.
Need to go bigger.
Yeah, just leave them a little bit. Thanks, Carl.
Really big on this.
Well. Okay, so there's language on the floor.
I'm not in disagreement with your general premise there, but what? I guess I'm a little stumped by the 30 days. How did you decide on that?
It seems to be a theme in here, it's like by 30 days, or, you know, that was kind of touched on in the enforcement section. But I think that they should, give the property owner about 30 days to remedy the violations before, pursuing, you know, further remedies, because like 30 days, it could be, who knows what the violation could be.
Yeah.
You know, I think if we wanted to extend that, but my kind of thought process here too is that when it's when it's a health and safety issue, the county has the authority to go and mediate it. They can, you know, they can abate it and, you know, at the owner's expense. And that's separate from this.
Sure.
So I think that this is just for violations that are not, you know, immediately putting people in danger, just like technical violations. They should have about 30 days to, you know,
So this section is dealing with violations that were in place prior to the land use code. So chapter one is really kind of the transition from into the land use code. Chapter 13 speaks to addressing the new violations under the land use code
Yeah.
post adoption.
So, oh, and that kind of brings me, thank you, that's a really good, difference between the two. So, yeah, if a violation occurred prior to the effective date and then continued past, there are so many people in this county who have no clue that this land use code exists. So as it was written there, each day that the violation stood, which could be a year right now, would be a separate offense, which is a fine. And we don't even know what the fines are because the fine schedule hasn't been published. So once we vote this in, then the fine schedule gets published, say it's $1,000 a day. You're now looking at $365,000 without even being notified that you were in violation. Just how it's written. So I would think that the remedies should start 30 days after the notice was served on the property owner.
$1,000 seems like steep too.
That's what, right now, just per state statute, it's 100 to 1,000. That's what they're looking at, that they can fine us for each violation. And with this code, the language it has, each day is a separate violation and a separate fee, and they're cumulative.
Never gonna get a hit out.
Well, there's a lot more to this process that a lot of people aren't aware of, so. That depends on if you wanna hear it.
Yeah.
So, first of all, we're gonna just walk up.
Wait. I understand, but you guys have lots to go through.
Yeah.
And I do think part of this is legal, and so part of it is state statute, part of it is, so. I do think in the interest of all of your all's time and to really get into respect what you put forward, Victoria, I do think it is a conversation you and John Bear and Brad Lewis and Everett and maybe Jacob and Austin can have and really hash this out. I think that's a better use of everybody's time. So,
I think,
and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
Yeah,
jump
no,
ahead
no.
of you guys, but
I'm wondering if we can kind of come to some consensus without specific language, but like, does the rest of the commission kind of
Flag it for-
agree with the general premise of what Victoria is flagging? Like, do we think that's a more appropriate approach than what is currently written? And then like the actual language can kind of be hashed out.
that's exactly right, yeah. So I just didn't want to get into the weeds and I apologize
Thank
again
you.
for inserting.
For all your comments to do with legal issues.
I wasn't aware that this was to do with legal issues. Mostly my opinion and my morals, but I think you should not be able to have fines on a property owner without being sure that the property owner was aware of the violation.
Yeah.
So if it's deemed that this is a legal matter, I think, yeah, that I should look at it, but all of this is essentially a book of law that we're talking about here, and I think we've been voting on it all night long. So if the language, if the county attorney has an issue with the language, then that can be discussed later, but I'd still like to just go through what I have and like everyone else, just take your vote.
Voting on one thing or voting on a page or.
Just the language right there, so A and B, or we could do them separately. A mostly focuses on the property owner needs to be notified before remedies are pursued. I think the property owner has the right to know that there's a violation before they get the bill. And then B is if a violation occurred prior to the effective date, but is no longer a violation. So we took something that was in the draft code that was A or C, and now it's A. Then the county will stop pursuing from that property owner because it's no longer a violation. So if they were in violation, but they're no longer in violation, then we will not pursue remedies against them because they're no longer in violation.
I think Robbie's recommendation, but sitting down with John Beer on this really is sensible. Because there's evidently other things come into play, Everett started to talk about that, but I feel much more comfortable. Not saying that what you're describing here doesn't sound quite right, but I'd like to hear a full analysis of that from the county attorney.
We're telling in your language, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but it just feels like we're telling the county they have to cease all efforts and pursue any remedies from the property owner. That's a stipulation, and I'm not sure the county attorney would agree to, because it's limiting the county's ability to pursue things. As again, I think it's sort of a legal issue for him to decide before we make these recommendations. I'm not comfortable having only seen it this afternoon. Because that's, I guess I would have.
Okay, we're gonna flag this. Is there a second for this language or?
I mean, I would second the general philosophy that, probably a waste of the county's time to be pursuing things that are no longer in violation. We've decided they're not a problem.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor of the green language with the stipulation that John Bayer this will be flagged for John and he can look at it.
Yeah, as long as you can look at it.
Please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Okay. Chapter 2.
Well, she's got one more strike in the entire paragraph. Is that? We did
Number 2.
fines and
Oh, sorry.
penalties. Okay, we're taking that out
Fines and
completely.
penalties.
That's the recommendation.
Victoria,
Yes,
please
yes.
address that.
Take that out completely, touching on the same topic as the county wants to pursue violations, even if they're no longer considered a violation. And so I just think that they should cease hazards.
Okay, motion is to strike that paragraph. Is there a second?
Yeah. Sort of, I think that's a John Bear question. It sounds like it has a base in law that made sense to somebody somewhere. And I'd like to hear Bear's comments.
If we were here, we talked to them.
Yeah, but I think that we send either this or her and this to him, like Robin suggested.
To me, that paragraph is different than the above one because it talks about civil penalties that are already assessed prior to the effective date. That to me means that they have been noticed, the fines have already been assessed, and I do think the county should have maintained the ability to collect those fines that have already been assessed, even if the problem is no longer. They've already been told they were out of violation, and under this would be like, okay, well, I'm just not gonna pay my fines until the next land use code is
I think
passed.
my thought with that was just since we've changed the land use code quite a bit, it seems, in the last couple of years, and that what was allowed and what's not, that, it doesn't make sense to me that even if they were, notified and maybe weren't able to pay it, that now if it's no longer a violation, it's like, why should we still be pursuing these remedies from this person when everybody else can do the same thing and it's not a violation? Like
Yeah.
your neighbor's doing it, that neighbor's doing it, but I'm getting fined for it.
Yeah, I
What
totally
changes
understand that
now?
philosophy.
2 years old or something? But I don't. Know how to read into it this far, but.
So is there a second for striking? Hearing none.
Yeah, I would second it.
Have an amnesty,
Yeah,
even though you were assessed and you chose not to pay it or couldn't pay it, that we're going to forgive it.
yeah. If there's not out of violation
It's not a
currently.
violation.
All those in favor of striking 2, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay.
Nay.
No,
Okay, motion passes. That was the first one of many.
Okay, or shoot.
It's so nice when those hyperlinks work.
That first.
B6. Additional residences. The. The recommendation is that it just, to delete this language. And just say all points of access shall be designed in accordance with the applicable county road standards, is that correct?
Yeah,
And reasoning being this is
I
just
think,
too
I think it's just,
extra.
yeah, too extra, too restrictive. I mean, everybody, it just says, multiple access for multiple units is discouraged unless the county engineer determines it would be impacted due to unique circumstances. So basically, we're back with the system. It's allowed if you can say that it's, if you have a reasoning. So instead of going through all these loopholes, make sure your accesses are designed in accordance with applicable county road standards. You have to get it approved, you have to get an access permit, you have to go through all the same standards, but it doesn't go through this entire, you have to check A, B, and C.
It's accesses, kind of, I mean, you can.
Right, this is avoiding the issue of like having, you could have 4 residences with
Or
4 different accesses that are designed according to county standards.
Yeah.
But it's still kind of is a clusterfuck altogether, and this is encouraging consolidating all those.
Yeah, I kind of like this one, I like this stand, just because I know how that ball bounces.
Page, please.
Page 60,
60.
or maybe 59 of yours, sorry, I'm looking here at 43.
I would really wanted to be over here, short drive. When we got.
So your language, Victoria, is the green being struck or the red being added?
My language is not up there currently, I don't think. I wanted to strike the red and then just put all access points shall be designed in accordance with county road standards.
Whose language is the red?
This is the board's language at this point.
This would go against other county standards for sure, what you're talking about here. I mean, this pretty well falls in line with every neighboring county.
I think for wildfire safety, they want to see some multiple accesses so people can get out of there.
Well, it just depends on what it is, if it's one house or what's with,
Well, and that's what it says. It says access for additional units shall be consolidated with primary access. So if you have multiple units, one driveway.
But you're saying that you want that struck.
You'll run into it.
That's kind of, my thought process was that it says that it's discouraged. It doesn't say it's not allowed. It doesn't say that, there's no, I don't know what the reasoning
There's
is.
standards right now, though. I mean, like you get 1, 2, 3, they start looking at that stuff, right now.
What do you mean?
Like if we're one residence, it's this big and comes in here. If there's 2 residents, it's this big. If there's 3, then you start building county roads in there. After 3, you build county road.
So that's kind of where I'm going with this, is that if you have, if you want different residences on way different corners of your property or whatever, right? Why would you have to consolidate all of the, because then you'd have to give them a county road name, you'd have to have a dust control plan, you'd have to go through all of the processes on your property, on your driveway. Or you could have one access for this unit and one access for this unit, which will probably be granted anyway. If you go to them and say, one of my units is over here and one of my units is over here, like how am I gonna combine them and consolidate? They're more than likely gonna grant that. It's just discouraged, it's not allowed, but I just think that it, to simplify it, just say they should all, because really,
Is there support for this language?
This language?
No,
Victoria's changed.
Victoria's language,
Striking it out.
all points of access shall be designed in accordance with the applicable county road standards, which would replace that language.
Or do you have that?
Applicable county road standard. It looks like the commissioner said, whatever they are, they're not enough. We want to add this.
Well, the commissioner put it back into the purview of the county engineer. This takes it out of the purview of the county engineer. It has to do with the road standards, so the county engineer doesn't get to determine anything if you take any language out. I don't support changing the language. I understand what you're trying to simplify, but the commissioners, in my reading of this, they wanted the county engineer to determine some factors regarding access.
Can I amend my language? I
Well,
don't have it
let's
to-
move on. We've got a lot to go through.
What would you, I would say.
Amended to all access points shall be designed in accordance with applicable county road standards as deemed by the county engineer.
What is the difference between this?
Why are we changing it at all?
Now, what's the big?
Because right there, it's like with the cisterns, it's this long paragraph that has all these, you know, discretionary things. One person gets it, one person doesn't, because it's discouraged. But really, what matters is that all of the roads are up to standard and that it's not causing effects on all the neighbors. You know, so if they're up to standard, if you've had to have your permit, you're gonna get it anyway if you want it. But this is just confusing and, you know, just restrictive of for the reason. I think that just saying they should all follow county road standards, and then if you can't get an access right there because the engineer says, no, you don't need an access there, then you can't get one. But if you can, why not? You know, if I want to access to the bottom half of my property with my tractor, so I can go do that, and I want my,
You're not,
well, but it's an access.
an ag access, you can do about any. We're talking residents, is the only.
But that's the thing I'm confused about, is this, I don't see anything saying specifically residential, it just says.
It's not ag.
If I could clarify, this is under additional residential units,
Oh, okay, yeah.
right?
Like ag access, you can get to your property by any way you want. We're talking residents.
I think there was enough conversation where county commissioners that there were enough people asking for multiple access points on their property that it was a problem. And the county engineer was discouraging it, and that's why they used, I think the meeting with the county engineer, he used the word discouraged. And I think that's why it's in here. I don't think I don't want to take it out personally, because I think it was a result of a meeting with the county engineer.
Bad planning for sure.
And I think that's why they wanted to specifically state something about multiple accesses are being discouraged.
Let's move on if you will.
Mhm.
Okay.
On chapter 3.
So the next one, where you had, I believe, this subsection C,
I
but you didn't
see
have
it.
anything specific?
There's no language on it.
Yeah, my daughter's sorry. I think I just wanted it to be more than 3 dwelling units, so the traffic impacts can be kind of expensive and tedious.
Where are we talking about?
C,
Want to get back?
Right below.
I thought maybe.
Same place.
5 dwelling units.
I think why they're saying that is because in the road requirements, that's kind of where you start stepping her up in class a little bit right there, so they're kind of lining up with that.
Again, I don't, what are you asking? What are you saying here? I don't see.
Going
any-
to 3 to 5.
I just wanted to touch
I
on
don't-
it and see if there was any interest there and. of
But
the
it doesn't
dwelling
line up with the roads.
Yeah, I heard he's got a point. It's 3 is where we make that line.
Right. Chapter 3.
Three, section 1B,
Give us a page when you get to it.
90.
90? Thank you.
setbacks,
And so.
reducing 15 feet to 10 feet. I think that's the main change.
And,
Well, and some language.
yeah, and I just want to explain the language, in A. I think that because of, like, including shared access where a road name has been assigned, that can happen as soon as there's, you know, 3 units using that access. And you may not be 25 feet away from that access as is. So. And I see it, you know, in the city and everything too. I just don't see the need for 25 feet from your driveway that you need to build, you know? And this is all buildings, structures, sheds, anything at all that you have at 25 feet away from your driveway.
That'd be like existing non-compliant though. It's there,
Well-
but if you go beyond that, then you get bigger standards, therefore you're non-compliant. I'm not making tear it down, it's just, that's where you're at.
So, and that's why that's the change of language there, is just 25 feet from all public roadways, because then you're off of the public roadway, but you're still close to your private property driveway.
But what if it's a shared access private?
I'm preferring more to a private road, not specifically a driveway.
Right, so for example, there's a winery. The road that stops being public, it becomes private, and the house is right on the road, on the edge of the road. Right, storm cellar, is that right?
Yeah.
That one, I remember they came in for something, we were looking at that. So if you take this out, in that type of scenario, people can build right up to the roadway. Which actually has an issue for emergency access in some cases.
And it blocks the road, so.
Because it is, even though it's private, it's being shared by multiple people.
And many times private roads become public. The county takes them over.
At some
They're
point.
just
In some
doing,
cases, but
they're
yeah.
doing that on River Ridge
Yeah,
Road
this
right now.
did not include a drive.
I think my main concern here is that where a road name has been assigned doesn't necessarily mean that you've caused that road name to be assigned. You just have enough residences on your property that the GIS system can assign a road name. Is that correct? Because
No, you have to, and you have to build the road to the specs time you get there.
That's lots. Hardy, so when you have 3 or more lots, then it becomes a local road, have to be local road standard. So it could be private. It doesn't have to be a public road, but 3 or more lots. But if you have more than 3 units, it may require a road name. It's up to GIS to make that determination.
that's my
Lucky
issue.
Robbie just.
Right.
I've been out
to go from
so I'm
25
like, don't mistake.
No, I kept 25. I just wanted to specify public roadways. I want you to be 25 feet with public roadways, but if it's your private roadway, I don't think that, you know, and like I said, my issue here is that you might not necessarily ever plan for that roadway to have a county name. But somebody else is gonna assign it a county name and then boom, you're in violation because, or you are in violation.
But then what happens?
No, you're legally non-conforming because you did it before you were in violation.
Right, and roadway, there's definitions in the road standards for things, the roadway is completely, it's defined differently from a driveway.
Okay,
So that's where some of this language is getting pulled from, is from those road standards.
that
So-
makes a lot of sense. I'm going off of driveway.
So, and I
The
know,
road down my house.
I know where you're coming from, but it is that's where some of the definitions in the road standards kind of get confusing, but that's what it is pertaining to. So it's private roads that are privately maintained, not maintained by the county.
And
So
that
it's not a
includes the shared
driveway.
ac-
Sorry.
And that includes the shared access. I think that's where it got me. Because access, in my mind, just means access onto the property.
So the shared access can be a requirement of like the subdivision, depending, you know, if you've got 2 lots, they can require shared access for the standards, but it's still private. It's not for public use. Not for anybody to just drive onto your property because it's a public road. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Move on.
I suppose.
I think the setbacks are important. I mean, do.
Yeah, I think she just understood that it was different definitions between the driveway, so
But she just said no support for the language, so she's wanting.
we'll just move on.
So the-
Yeah, and I assume you're okay with the way it is.
She was wanting to know what it is.
Is that right?
But we can move on.
Well, the question is there, consider Victoria's as a motion. Is there a second for what Victoria has put forward? I haven't heard that yet.
Yeah, I heard that she got an understanding of the difference between roadways and driveways. And she was okay with it. But if I'm wrong, let me know, Victoria.
I'm okay to move on. I'm probably just gonna go look at the county, whatever, with roadways, because access to me, I'm still a little bit, your access, I think, is a driveway, but if there's a certain definition, I'll just look into that.
Okay.
So the next change is to subs item B. Reducing 15 to 10 feet and then also revising the language.
Yeah, so interior property lines, is that just meaning your property lines up against other properties?
It would be side and rear property lines,
Yes.
not
so-
your front property. Your front property line is 25 feet.
Okay, then, yeah, we're on the same page. I just thought it should be reduced a little bit.
It actually used to be 25 feet, so it has been reduced.
Great, that's really great, 'cause 25 feet is lost.
And that's why we also added the 5 feet for the non-habitable. That's new as well.
Does anyone want to change 15 to 10?
No, I think Chapter 4, section 2. See.
That's internal circulation interconnection. Right,
Yeah.
2C1A would be just straight this, is that correct, Victoria?
Yeah, so, so it touches back on what I was with the, access is that it's a shall be interconnected, and if you have multiple access into your property, connecting them might just be an unnecessary use of land and everything else. That was my thought, is, unless we can just change shall to may.
Does staff have input on, the intention of why this is important or how it got in the?
I don't, because it's from 2021. And Robbie, I don't know if you can have light on that. This one wasn't changed from the 2021 code.
I will say this is I looked up about the subject properties, and in this section it's not every property with a habitation on it. It is properties that are subject to review essentially. So I don't know if that matters kind of for what we're talking about. This is like multiple units, more, things that are already being reviewed rather than, if you have a house and a barn, this
Actually,
isn't,
chapter 4 does apply allowed use. So allowed
Okay.
use is subject to it. It is not subject to review.
Okay. Hi. But, okay.
So this feels like these recommendations came from the engineer.
Well, I think Hardy's right. This had to make sure that if there was an emergency, that somebody could get turned around without having dead ends everywhere. So that's all I remember, but I don't remember the specifics. Sorry.
Again, I think county engineer would have weighed in on this as far as public safety, right? I don't want to be changing something that they weighed in on. Certainly can bring it up to the Board of County Commission discussion,
Maybe we could try this one from my discussion with John Bear as well.
or the county engineer.
Or either one, yeah.
Okay.
I would just like to see may there and have it be less restrictive. When you have shall, it's a must. If you have two access points that have nothing to do with each other and they're approved, if they're legally there. This is saying that they shall be interconnected. And it just may not be necessary, but I'd like to see what shows up.
This was boilerplate in consultants.
This is from the original one. As well, so you're just good.
Yeah, I don't remember, I'm sorry.
My motion as of right now is just instead of strike that we put may instead of shall. So that can be determined by the the engineer at the time of the road.
There's support for that change from me.
I'll
or shout
second
to
that.
May.
I guess that's something that's reasonable. The engineer's gonna look at it.
Okay.
Means something. May is, okay. Well, I don't think it means a whole
Not just point, it's hardly a circulation system, and it's not interconnected.
Are there any other quippy comments? All those in favor of the change from shall to may, please say aye. Any opposed, nay? I think that was 2-3.
Okay, so no change.
No.
Okay. So the next is C2B, number of access points. Strike everything past D. Past N can be.
Yes.
Like strike C.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm going for, strike C, D, E, which have mostly already been struck. And again, it's talking about, you know, each lot is allowed 1 point of access, additional access points to subject property may be considered if the county engineer determines that they meet Delta County roadway and construction standards. So basically what I was trying to get with chapter 2 was to line up with what is already here. But this I'm just trying to simplify.
D and E already struck, right? Not,
Not entirely. D is changed.
oh, yeah, you're right, I'm sorry, actually should be shown on 5, so yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, I don't necessarily have a problem with that one.
Again, I'm all for you having a discussion with the county engineer on these changes, and if he supports it, I wouldn't object. You know, I just don't wanna make changes without his input, and we just haven't had the time to do that. These are all sort of county engineering issues, as far as I'm concerned. And road standards that I don't really wanna feel, I'm not comfortable making changes that he's not qualified, he's not here to answer.
I didn't know that guy worked here still, actually.
It just leaves when you show up.
He's smart too.
That's my feeling. I'm not saying you're wrong language, because I just don't want to change it here. I'm not comfortable changing. That's why I voted no without his input, and we're not gonna do that tonight.
I don't see any problem with C, I guess. I don't know what we'd solve by striking it, but
It's also
Yeah.
changing B.
yeah.
Okay.
Hearing no support. Victoria, at this point, you know, at our last work session, I had asked everyone to give a top 5 and most people followed that rule. Do you have anything substantive in here that you'd like to really discuss? Because at this rate, we'll be here till 9:30, 10.
I actually really do.
Okay. Let's
But
identify
I
those.
just have a quick question for my own personal studies. Chapter 6,
Mhm.
is chapter 6 solely talking about land that's been dedicated to the county? It's
Yes.
okay, the whole thing is just land that's been dedicated.
Right.
All right, and that's like via the person dedicating, not,
Correct.
okay. Okay, so chapter, let's see. Chapter 13, I have a lot in chapter 13.
If I may, it's gonna kind of go into the same category as talking with John Barrett is
Right,
the county attorney wrote chapter 13.
right. All these are legal questions.
Yes, and I know that a lot of what, a lot of the remedies that they can pursue are just state statute, you know, it lays it out, they're pretty harsh. But this, you know, I think we have some language here that should listen to at least, like with the site inspections, and so I'd say let's just start with chapter 13, section 1A2.
Page, please. Thank you.
This goes back to what I was talking about earlier. Each day constitutes a separate offense, and that violation, that separate offense is a separate fine, and they're all cumulative. So to me, and when you continue through this, you know, of course, they have the right to take your property because the Colorado state statute or Colorado government has given them those rights. I just don't agree that, because ultimately we have the choice to include those in our land use code or not. If they want to pursue the remedies through the state statutes, they can. But I don't think that each day should constitute a separate offense in our county level.
Again, I feel like it's a legal question. I mean, you're referencing the state statutes and you're determining that is, I'm not comfortable. Again, I think just have the conversation with John Bear as to why this is in here.
Is there anyone that feels that that's a bit excessive as well? That maybe, you know, getting a $30,000 bill in the mail, and then if you can't pay it within 30 days, it goes into, I mean, we can go through the process, but it basically, they put a lien on your property, and if you can't pay the lien, then it goes into foreclosure. And this is all based off of a violation that as of right now, nobody will, you know, you can't even verify that the property owner knows that they're in violation. This code doesn't provide for the property owner to be aware of that. It just says each day that a violation exists constitutes a separate offense. So it existed all this year because I've had you know, we've had people building and nobody knows, right? About the code. And then all of a sudden you get a bill because that violation has been a violation for 6 months.
But the code is a law and you can't say, I don't deserve the speeding ticket because I didn't know the speed limit was 55. It's a law that you should abide by, whether or not you have taken the time to be aware. And so it's not really fair to say, use like, well, I didn't know it existed, so I shouldn't have to pay. Like,
Well, I think the remedies should, the violation fees should start the moment that this person is aware. I don't think that it should just start the moment the violation came into existence. Because
so you only have to pay your speeding ticket from the time the cop puts on his flashers to when you pull over and you're going over the speed limit. Like, if you're breaking the law from the minute you're breaking the law, you're in violation. I'm not, and I think that's a slightly, it's a little bit more nuanced. Like I'm not necessarily saying every day the violation exists should constitute a separate fee schedule essentially. Like I don't know where I stand on that, but I don't think saying you don't have to pay a fee if you've been in violation for 5 years, but you only have to pay a fee if you are in violation for 5 days between when you noticed you and when you paid your fee. Like,
but what if you just truly didn't know? Like, what if?
well, you should have read the land use code before you developed your property.
Can I chime in here?
Yeah.
Ignorance is never an excuse for a violation of law. So there are several legal precedents all the way to the Supreme Court that have upheld this ordinance throughout the country. I could give you 7 reasons why it works. The first one is the purpose of deterrence. The primary reason is really by imposing daily penalties, it's aiming to encourage swift compliance with regulations. So to give an example, the city of Akron versus the Central Plaza, the court held that each day a zoning violation constituted separate offenses, justifying separate daily penalties. It does help to avoid prolonged violations, which we have several of in this county. So with such a principle, a violator might find it more economical to simply pay a one-time fine than continue the violation indefinitely. And usually there's some sort of, negotiation between what the fine would actually be when there's multiple days in violation. It helps to uphold various levels in many courts. So literally this code has been upheld from local municipal courts all the way to the Supreme Court. To give some more precedent, the county of Santa Clara versus the Atlantic Richfield, Colorado, In 1995, the court found that for certain environmental contamination violations, which is something we have many of, each day the contamination remained could be considered a separate violation, leading to cumulative penalties. So while the principle is widely accepted, it's obviously not without its challenges for exactly what you're talking about. And that excessive daily fine can really violate constitutional protections against the excessive fines. But we do have the 14th Amendment in this country, which incorporates protection to the excessive fines so that we are not allowed to give somebody a $30,000 fine for, say, parking a defunct RV in their front yard or something like that. So, that principle of each day there is a separate offense, it's really well established and defined in land use code throughout the country. And it really just serves to deter ongoing violations and encourage compliance. So we really need that language in there in order to get rid of egregious violations that are really driving down property values and keeping people out. So that's what I would have to say.
It's sort of our
about that.
point, a lot of these comments are based on, a lot of the way that it's written is based on legal statute.
Right.
And I'm just not comfortable trying to, it may not make sense to you, but if there's already been case law and statute, then we shouldn't be discussing. I think we should be discussing it with
I
John
already
Bear.
know that there's case law and statute,
Yeah,
that's
so
what I'm
the-
saying, I'm saying that I think we should be less, you know,
But there are a case law and statute that,
where you
Yes,
can
or-
enforce it in cases when you want to. It's that shall, must, this is how it is. A violation can literally be, you know, my dog got loose. We have domestic voice control animal codes. So if your dog gets loose, it's a violation. You know, it could literally be anything. So for me, it's just each day that a violation exists. I don't know how you separate things that are actually causing harm and things that have not caused any harm, especially when the person didn't know that they were in violation for
but then,
years.
but then that's the harm, you're talking about a legal concept that I just think have the conversation with John.
Yeah, I mean, I see where you're coming from, but it's been widely established. The conversation might not go that far with John, I guess is what I'm gonna say.
And
I
that's,
think
and that's
John's got an answer.
why I'm here.
Why she's wrong.
I think we've heard of examples though, like on the West Coast of $100,000 fines being assessed for somebody, $1,000 a day for 3 years. And they
Yeah,
weren't even
but
aware of it.
we're the ones that are gonna be assessing the fine. We're never gonna put $100,000 fine.
We're not gonna be the ones sitting in these chairs. This is a law that we're putting into place for who knows until it's amended. And they've already taken out, I mean, if you guys have seen chapter 14 or chapter 13, I guess, before it was all stricken up with enforcements, they had pretty much all of the state statutes listed in there. Yes, they're all legal. Yes, you can use them all to pursue your remedies. However, we don't need to include that as a must because this is our land use code.
It's not included as a must. What's being described is a negotiated procedure amongst the rule enforcers in land use against the violator. And it gives a range of opportunity or a range of negotiations
Right.
for that to occur. That's a commonly held method of operation in governments, is to have an extreme example of what they could do to force other things to happen that are not extreme to get the problem solved.
Right.
This is not a unique issue. It's not an onerous issue. It's a matter of how governments operate all over the place at every level.
I know that, but what I'm saying is what's being described to us via our planning director is not what is in our code. What is in our code is strictly each day a violation exists constitutes a separate offense, does not specify what violations it's talking about, does not specify that you'll get a chance to appeal because they're all civil infractions. In civil infractions, you don't get to appeal. You know, the list goes on. I just feel that we should, if we're gonna have it be each day a violation exists, constitutes a separate offense, it should be in a violation that is affecting people's health, their safety. It shouldn't be a violation that is, you know, this cistern is supplying water and it's not supposed to be. I
We
don't,
did away with this.
I know, I'm, how can they figure that I can't do it?
Conversation, chapter 13 with a lot, because you have a lot of questions with John. All the things you're going into are
You'll
legal.
understand, this goes before a judge.
So these are all legal concepts.
The
that I
judiciary
don't really feel
process,
comfortable
a
practicing
judge
law.
will decide if it's validated or not. This is a whole concept. If you take away the tools, you can't get to the process.
If John, maybe if I
Exactly,
could,
said it doesn't go.
Yeah,
If I-
a civil infraction, you
Hold on.
cannot appeal.
Okay, again, you're into the legal avenues, and I don't think we should be writing what's appealable and not appealable.
Can we just send it to John, all after 13?
If John will rewrite it to satisfy you, then I'm okay with John, what John says.
So he's bringing a lot of his personal opinion and not just strictly legal.
Eli, this is not a conversation that I think we want to have with the public either. This is for John and for Victoria to make sure she's satisfied with why it's in the land use code.
I think we have to be careful taking votes at a not public hearing
Be careful of taking the county attorney's legal opinion.
let's just.
That's what you.
Well, I've spoken with them directly, and a lot of it is just
Chapter
personal
14.
political opinion, not necessarily a legal definition.
Well, he's not here.
We're gonna take chapter 13 for John, we're gonna send it to him. That brings us to 14. You have a couple things in here.
Yeah, 14, I just wanted to clarify when somebody is camping on their own property versus when they have a camping business. And that would be that a camping unit shall not include purposes of private recreational, educational, and vacation purposes in periods not to exceed 30 days. So if my sister wants to come visit and park her RV, it's allowed instead of conditional.
What page is this?
264 is what I have.
I have
42.
Okay, thank you.
I'm confused by this. Without seeing kind of the context in which camping unit is used,
So,
to be honest, do you know what,
yeah.
is that like in the table 2B or is that somewhere else that talks about camping?
It talks about camping and campground, and so a camping unit is what's on a campground, which is right above it. It says, you know, including parking for replacement of recreational vehicles. Campground is similar to an RV park. I just want to specify in the camping unit that if I have a tent for educational, recreational, or vacation purposes, for not to exceed 30 days, that it's allowed.
But this is just definitions. This isn't how
Yeah,
it's used.
so-
You're including use in the definition, and that's not what it
The
should be here.
reason for that is to exclude for the purposes of private recreational, educational, and vacation purposes. So it's just clarifying that a camping unit is not somebody visiting on your property. That's not them camping on your property.
And you're just wanting to add the 30 days.
They are camping on your property.
Okay.
If it's private property or if they're camping, they're camping.
So I guess the reason I'm trying to work with the definition here is because we made all camping conditional or limited.
We'll make
So-
campground.
Right.
So where's camping? Campground, but then,
It doesn't affect, those don't affect unless they're in a homeowners association. Covenant kind of control situation.
We, Victoria, you just wanted to add the 30 days, because I'm seeing. the
She
same-
wants to exclude like private use essentially.
Because it says campgrounds are not allowed, but it doesn't say anything camp. And you should be able to camp on your own property, as long as you're not living in a tent.
Is there-
Allow people to put a camper on properties. For luminous amounts of time, you know, I mean, well, they may be limited,
They have
but
to-
it's.
Yeah.
You gotta have a permit or.
No,
I mean, you could have a yurt, a tent, an RV, whatever, could become a dwelling unit if it's attached to permanent.
Yeah, but
with water.
that's the thing, I just want something in here that talks about camping.
I think you're fighting a battle that isn't even here unless I'm missing it. Is there a- I'm taking it.
Is there a second for this language? Hearing none,
I mean, I don't
dwelling.
see-
Katie's on the fence. Going
I'm
once,
still just
twice.
trying to figure out like kind of all where, yeah, they use. Where else in the code aside from the definitions like this comes into play, I guess. I agree, Victoria, that I don't think someone, my, brother-in-law camping in my backyard should be considered a campground. But
Where does it show that it is though?
Right.
It
yeah,
just doesn't
that's
address
fine.
it at all.
yeah.
So
And
good.
so I was
We're
trying to
done.
address it so that.
Okay, hearing no support, dwelling unit, we have a.
Someone uses the definition.
Yeah,
camping
camping
yeah.
unit, yeah, I don't really see.
That's the only place that it's used.
So does it need to be in there at all? If there's a definition, but no reference at
Fair
all?
point. I don't know why we're defining it.
Yeah, if it's not in the code anywhere else, we don't really need the definition. No.
No, I just did a search and the only
But
place.
yeah, I don't have to strike camping unit from definitions if it's not used anywhere.
This thing.
Those regs are not in here.
Motion is to strike camping units, second for that.
Strike.
Camping,
The definition of camping unit,
because it's not anywhere else in the code.
that we know of,
well, he just did a search for it. Nowhere in there.
and that works,
Yeah.
you can do that.
The computer.
Oh my gosh, do you know how to use the find feature? I gotta show you to see if it'll change your life.
See up here where it says
I
fine.
need it.
I didn't second that, if it's nowhere else, then we're trying to encourage people.
Are we setting a precedent that we need to check every definition to see? if it's-
Probably should.
Setting precedent that this thing's getting shorter by the day. so-
You know,
I think so, but this was flagged, it's been caught, we don't, we can go check all the definitions.
Yeah.
we have a motion and a second, so that's.
Yes.
Any other discussion around camping unit? All those in favor of striking camping unit from the definition, please say aye. Opposed? Okay, your last note was on dwelling unit, Victoria.
Yeah, I just wanted to strike portion of a building.
Is that in definitions?
So
Why
that-
strike a portion of a building?
I feel like if you have a finished basement, that you're not counted as two dwelling units. Or if you have, a family is one person, so when it says complete living provisions for one family, it's one person.
What about a barnuminium?
Yeah.
Is that where this is kind of getting at? Is that
Yeah.
a structure?
That would be my interpretation, I mean, again, this was,
The one family has been struck out,
Yes.
it's not included.
Oh, I'm not the version, yes.
Well, I'm looking at dwelling unit in the
Yes, that's, we strike portion of a building, so that each dwelling unit is a building.
But doesn't address a shop with an apartment in it.
Right.
I mean, but if it's a shop with an apartment in it, that's a building that provides those things. I guess the only question is if there's some, there's some question, it'd be like if there's somewhere else in the code where it's like addressing what you can do with a building. Part of it's a shop, you know, and like,
Well, I mean, if you have a dwelling unit inside a commercial building, it's still a dwelling unit.
but, and,
Doesn't determine the entire building is a dwelling unit.
right, so. Right, so that would go to Victoria's point where we don't need a portion of the building in there, but I think. Her concern is like, yeah, she doesn't want a finished basement to be considered an additional unit, but in my. I guess reading of an ADU is, yeah, if you have. A finished apartment. That you have a whole nother family or person living in that's attached to your building, it's a portion of your building.
So perfect example of Delta Cleaners would be
Yeah.
located outside of city limits, would that have been considered a dwelling unit? The whole upstairs portion of it was a house.
Yeah, it would have been commercial and a residential.
It's a portion of the building.
Yeah.
It's a dwelling unit.
Yeah,
What about a
Which I
duplex?
think is an important part of that.
What about a duplex? That's really technically one building that's split into
Right.
two different, I mean.
Well, we have a definition.
right, but then we have but yeah,
Yeah,
I don't,
I think we,
I think the language should stand, because if you have, yeah, essentially a duplex or a building that has two dwelling units in it, it should, both of those should be considered dwelling units, it shouldn't be considered a single dwelling unit
you can have multiple dwelling units.
in one
under
building.
One roof.
Yeah.
So it could be a portion of that building.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think we should keep it.
Any support to strike? Hearing none, that gets us through this. We flagged the engineer. We'll have the engineer look at 6. We'll have John look at 13, Victoria. Thank you, everybody. Is there an update from planning staff?
Just real quick, do you wanna, the commissioners asked me to ask you all, do you wanna join? Work session with them before you present this to them, or just move it on to them? So that's what the commissioners asked me.
Move on. I say we present it to them, and if they want the session to come back to us. If they have to change, Victoria had in the parking on, sorry, that it is. 8x25 to 8x18. 8x18 was the standard anything, and 8x25 seemed out of place. Is that right? I just want to make sure. I'm sorry, I don't know what chapter.
Chapter 4, section 3.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So chapter 4, section 3, table 4B.
I think it was just,
It was 8.
yeah.
The
8 by
first one was
18.
8x25 and all the other ones were 18.
Yeah,
So change it back to 18 because that's the standard through there. I think we should support that. That looks to me like. I don't know why all of a sudden one parking space got 7 feet bigger. I think we missed that, Victoria.
No, hold up here.
and actually another maybe fine print thing that we could look at really quick is the average daily trips per unit. For whatever reason, the single family is the highest by far, and that's over multifamily units, that's over, what is it? Mobile home parks. And so I just wanted to get down that average daily trips per unit.
But it's per unit, that might be correct. A single family home might make more daily trips per unit than an apartment building for whatever reason they've studied it, and there's more people that use public transportation, or there's, well, I don't know. This is not looking at it, that's just speculation. The per unit trip might change.
Single family units generate.
The ITE manual. The 10 ADT is based on nationwide assessment as far as,
With the following modification.
again, that's just straight out of the ITE manual, that's, whether you wanna change it or not, but that's where.
That's. Right, it says calculations are based on the ITE with the following modification. So is that not saying that these are modifications from the ITE? It literally says with the following modification. From the ITE.
All you can say is that the ITE specifies single family residence generates an average of 10 daily trips.
So could we
So
make
when
it
you're
like-
calculating how much traffic is generated by a single family home, you use a factor of 10.
It's actually 5, 1 in and 1 and out of 1.
Well, that's the 10. It's in and out.
Yeah.
But yeah, 5 in, 5 out.
Yeah, I think if the IPE says that, I'm not sure what, I'm gonna change it.
Yeah, I think it doesn't.
You logically, you do it.
So are we addressing this 8x25?
Is
was
that
the
a
first thing.
typo?
Parallel, it says 8x25, all the others are 9 by.
Parallel is. You have to get it into that space. I don't think it's a typo. I think when you're at an angle, you have the ability to maneuver in and out where. Parking is, you're getting in between other cars that are straight thing.
Okay. I think that explained it. It is.
Then we're gonna,
One question, do we have an agenda or what's on our October 25th hearing? Would we know what's gonna come up?
Patients.
I was gonna ask if the planning commission wanted me to go over the housing strategies, the concept,
We don't have any,
but other than that, there are no projects.
We don't have the gravel pit return?
okay, so we're planning on meeting on the 25th.
I'm asking if the planning commission wants me to talk about the housing strategy.
Yes. I think
Yeah.
we should.
We need to get back to the consultant. Okay, we'll meet on the 25th. We are adjourned.